don't tell me it's Archangel Michael's feast day. Don't tell me it's the same thing I was saying, like with the 68 days with the TSA thing. I'm like, this can't, and I go to look it up and I'm like, oh shit, it's the fucking day.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica show. We are going to be chatting with David Charles Platt a little bit later about synchronicity and all sorts of fun stuff along those general lines. Great chat. David was a blast. And we're going to get into some other fun stuff in the intro here first. But first, as always, Graham Nassau Dunlop. How's it going, buddy?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, this was a great chat with David.
David Charles?
Yeah, it was one of those unexpected ones where we got into a bunch of stuff and I had a couple light bulbs go off and learned a few things. That was good.
Yeah, it was a fun one for sure.
Yeah. We got lots of good feedback. Sometimes what we do is on the intros here, you can skip forward to the interview if you want. We have a timestamp in the show notes, right, Darren?
Yeah, usually you can actually just hit skip.
Or you have a skip button.
I'll next put in a button chapter mark now.
Chapter mark. Oh, that's good. But we get listeners involved. We share their emails and
probably
some of their
doesn't work on this
stories.
shitty iTunes fucking player, though.
Social media stuff, synchronicities, UFO quotes, jingles, all that kind of stuff, just to, to get it off our chest, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah. So we got lots of good feedback from Craig's episode, Craig Flowers.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
No negative feedback, anyway.
No.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting for an email from a guy, or sort of authorization for me to read it out on the show. So I'll save that for next week.
Unless it says otherwise, everything's fair game.
Well, yeah, but this is sometimes I get a little personal and I'd like to ask them, before reading it out. But if you don't want your emails read out, please say so. Because most of the time I don't ask.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what do you got for me, buddy? What have you been up to? What's new? I was out in the mountains yesterday. Didn't see Bigfoot.
No, eh?
I seen a guy climb a frozen waterfall.
With ice picks?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Huh.
Looked kind of sketchy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
We had to clear out of there, He was doing it. There's a bunch of kids there, and he started this big chunks of ice coming down.
Really?
But if you fell, holy fuck.
Yeah, you're toast.
Oh, you're done.
Yeah. Was he tied? Oh, he was probably tied up at the top. No? Really?
Yeah.
Was it being filmed or something?
No. There was fucking 30 of us there watching him probably.
Wow.
I was just like, whoa. I was waiting. I was just like, oh, God. I'm not helping haul this guy out of here. I got shit to do.
You don't want your kids to see
this guy just get... Oh, you just fucking... I mean, it's not even that tall of a waterfall, but still, you have no hope of grabbing onto anything. You just fucking go sliding down to the bottom, doing nothing but gaining speed the whole time and get cut to shreds.
Yeah. Did you do any cold thermogenesis or anything while you're out in the mountains?
No.
Jump in a pool of freezing cold water?
No, I didn't see any pools of freezing cold water.
You didn't?
I'll keep my eye out, though.
Yeah, let me know where they are.
I'll let you know.
I'll join you.
Yeah. Please don't. Pools of freezing cold water tend to be just that.
They have cryotherapy near me. Oh.
Do they?
Yeah.
You just go there and cry?
I've been... Cry my liberal tears.
Yeah. They freeze you?
Yeah. I've been bugging them to get an infrared sauna there as well. But
they just freeze you and then you just go home with a chill?
I'll try it one of these days. I'll try it and then report back.
Yeah, let me know.
Will do.
What's next? What do you got?
Well, I got the little listener email, and
let's give Craig some fucking feedback.
Well, no, I said I'm waiting for Craig's feedback till next week because I have a really good big email to read about that. So here's one.
What jingle?
This is from Grumpy Green Guy.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, you should play a jingle.
What fucking jingle?
It's just a feedback. Feedback, like spam gram.
And now another edition of the Grimerican Goodies by the people. For the people.
That's why somebody emailed me Grimerica Goodies in the title.
There you go.
From that jingle. So this is from Grumpy Green Guy. He says, I really like the show. I found it looking for Coast to Coast on Spotify. Actually, it is cool to hear how people found the show as well. So
Yes.
it's fun. I've been listening for about 3 months now and also got my wife listening too. I just started donating monthly and was wondering if you still have the Sasquatch shirts. We'll talk about that later, but I'm sure I replied to him, but I can't remember what I told
No
him.
more
But there's a
We don't have
slash
any more
swag and yeah. And I have a few, but no Sasquatch ones though. So
And Cyrus is probably buying up whatever's left.
yeah, I hope so. Okay, so if so, how much do I need to send you to get to take the shot? So we're going to send everybody to that slash swag, and it takes you right to our store, and we get like just a couple bucks every time somebody buys something there.
Yeah.
It's
I
not
think
much.
we get like less money, but we have to do zero work, so it works out well.
Yeah, but it's way less work. Yeah, I used to have to walk to the mail, do the mail,
Oh, yeah.
mail each one out and stuff. So to my synchro. Right before the last show, I was thinking about how I never have any synchronicities in my life, or I just don't realize them.
It's a synchro, you jackass.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to do this all the time now so you don't get to play your little jingles.
I'm a rambling Graham with synchronicities all over the web.
I'll just play him anyway. Over you.
So he's right before the last show, he's thinking about how he doesn't get any synchronicities, right? Well, I guess you don't have any synchronicities. You don't get them, you have them, right?
You noticed them.
He says, then the show started and the friend of the show, Cyrus, works for the same company I do. I thought, well, that's a little synchro, but not really worth enough to spam Graham about. I was driving my route, so he's a UPS driver, and I was diverted to the Orlando hub, which I have been many times, but I never came from the south, always from the north. So right as the show ended, I almost got to my destination and turned onto Boggy Creek Road.
Nice.
Being that the expertise of the guest was the Boggy Creek Monster, it jumped out at me as a synchro. It's not a very profound one, but I donated, so I should get a few points. Keep up the good work. So I was driving down that when I was in Florida last month. I was driving by that Boggy Creek, and I thought it was the same Boggy Creek.
But it's not?
No,
Oh.
no, it's not. No, the other one's in
Louisiana?
yeah, somewhere like that.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
That's cool, though. I'm going to give him a double point for it, too, because he involved the show 2 times. That's going to be a total 0.84. He's going to get that would have been that episode with Cyrus, what he does.
Yeah, that's
Well,
kind
it's
of a little
looking-
compound, the synchro there.
We'll give him a 7.84.
Nice. Oh, he'll be happy with that. So thanks for the email.
Support. Any more?
I want to read that Instagram one.
Instagram?
Yeah. So it's a social media jingle. Is that the jangle?
Bingo, bango, social media jingle. Don't forget to rate, comment, and or subscribe to the Grimerica.
Actually, cancel that.
You're not reading it?
I'm going to save it. Because it's about Craig. I want to save it for the next episode.
Okay, I'll read some YouTube stuff. Okay, episode 209 from Darlene. This is a great interview. This one got me signed up for the newsletter. I've got some bills in my money pot that will be sent your way. Don't get too excited. It's a minimal amount, but feng shui powerful. My life is full of synchros.
Synchros.
Yeah, it says synchros. I'm assuming that you mean synchros. Someday I will find the time to share these stories. Keep up the interviews. I love the pre-show talk. Don't change. What else do we got here? Oh, from the guy who made this jingle that we just played. This interview was great. I love hearing about this guy's covert escapades and revealing Shakespeare's secrets.
Nice.
We got from Amber that she found us while driving through Alaska in the darkness of December.
I hope we helped in that darkness.
What else do we got? You guys could be doing better on the YouTube, on the social media.
No, the YouTube's been pretty good lately. People, I don't usually look at it, but there was some nice comments on there.
There's the your mom's a standard model.
The mom jokes have made it to YouTube.
Yeah, it was bound to happen.
Actually, I got a mom joke from one of our listeners too.
You need a control group for the ice spike experiment. How are you going to have a control group where you don't think about ice spikes? Eh?
Oh.
That's a tough one. We'll leave that one to Ephraim.
I didn't get that the first time I read it.
You
gotta just measure somebody's ice spikes who don't know they're being measured.
Sneak into someone's house and check their freezer. You know what? Funny enough, I kind of got that Xavier reminded me of Ephraim a little bit.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. That reminds me, while you're scrambling over there, I'm going to...
I'm not scrambling.
You're always scrambling a little bit.
Scrambling ground?
Okay, well, you can do this then.
I'll do the Churchill UFO quote.
Profound UFO quote of the week.
So I'm reading this from newscom.com.au, and this is I wanted to address this Churchill essay that was published about E.T., and then we can talk about something else after.
Sure.
So Winston Churchill's search for E.T. revealed in forgotten essay. So as Britain entered World War II to halt the spread of Nazi Germany, Winston Churchill had something else important on his mind: the existence of aliens. The iconic leader who led the English Empire as Prime Minister from 40 to 45 and again from 51 to 55 dedicated a great deal of energy to theorizing about extraterrestrial life. It's been revealed by a lost essay from 1939. Such was Churchill's belief in intelligent life outside our planet that in the 50s he ordered a suspected UFO sighting to be kept secret to prevent mass panic. Excerpts from his essay, Are We Alone in the Universe?, were brought to light this week when they were published in the science journal Nature. The 11-page essay reveals the man known as Winnie was among the first to theorize about other regions of the universe in which conditions may be conducive to harboring life. I'm not sufficiently conceited to think that my sun is the only one with a family of planets, Churchill wrote. There must be other planets, he concluded, the right size to keep water and possibly an atmosphere, and at the proper distance from their parent sun to maintain a suitable temperature. This later became known as a star's habitable zone, or more colloquially, the Goldilocks zone. The hunt for potentially habitable planets elsewhere in the universe began decades after Churchill's musings on the topic. And now, thanks to the work of NASA's Kepler telescope, astronomers have identified 216 planets believed to sit in habitable orbits around their parent stars. I thought it was more than that, actually. Stargazing may not be what Winston Churchill is best remembered for, but the essay demonstrates his scientific acumen 6 decades after he penned it, experts said. Astrophysicist Mario Lavillo, who first laid hands upon the document last year at the U.S. National Churchill Museum in Missouri, said that the writing proved the statesman had powers of reasoning like a scientist. The most amazing thing is he started with this essay when Europe was on the brink of war, and there he was, musing about a question about a scientific topic that is really a question out of curiosity, he said. Churchill first drafted the paper in 1939 when Europe was on the brink of war and revised it in the late 50s. It's believed the work was never published or subjected to scientific or academic scrutiny. He wrote essays and articles in the 20s and 30s on topics including evolution, cell biology, and fusion power. As a politician, he regularly consulted scientists and was the first British PM to employ a science advisor, according to Livio. At a time when a number of today's politicians shun science, I find it moving to recall a leader who engaged with it so profoundly. So, I don't know. So he engaged in science so profoundly, and he talked about UFOs and covering up UFO cases, but they never want to mention that? Why isn't that addressed? Why doesn't that bring the UFO subject some credibility then? Or does it need any more credibility? I mean, apparently it does because it's not accepted, especially in the U.S.
It needs more.
So why doesn't that add to it? They don't even really, they just gloss over that part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while looking at this, another little article popped up here, which I thought you might find interesting.
What was the last time we did the quotes?
What quotes?
Jackson Taylor's favorite quotes.
Quite a while ago. About
Was
five episodes, probably.
What should I play for a jingle for the quotes?
I don't know. It's kind of a jingle.
I already played that jingle, though.
I know.
Oh, actually, no, I'll use this one.
Graham is an all-in believer in chemtrails.
You're a dick.
Okay, we've got, I'm just going to go back to 207. Hopefully that's not 204. Too far. Cannabis is a non-specific amplifier which exaggerates whatever state of mind is. Your state of mind is. Potentially.
Yeah, I like that.
Also from 207, the divine unfolds when we step out of our little selves. And it's been speculated that the endocannabinoid receptor system is the most prominent receptor system in the human body. Yeah. Be cool. That was all from Stephen Gray, right?
Yep, and that was all you got for quotes, all cannabis related?
No, I go through up by up. 208, don't ever point that finger at me again or you're going to lose that finger, Dunlop. Also from 208, the problem with Christianity is there's 30,000 versions of it.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Takes me a bit, I think that was Michael's quote, actually. That was the episode Michael hijacked.
We should have a jingle for that.
That was this one. Episode 209, 43 of the most important mathematical constants in the world are all to be found in those proportions of the pyramid. Also from 209, we have a UK posse. We might be able to get one of them to bash that fucker open. And again from 209, I am what I am, and they have that level at my abuses reckon up their own. It's too smart for me. Takes me a bit to scroll through them when I'm not prepared to do them. Usually I'd screenshot them.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. There's no rush. But you've probably said enough.
Well, I want to get caught up at least, otherwise it'll be fucking, episode, did I miss 210?
Yep.
What was 210?
210 was Craig Flowers, right?
No, 211 was Craig
Oh, yeah,
Flowers.
that was Alan Green. No, Seth, it was Seth and Lyle.
Oh, that's right.
Body Creek.
Here it is. Episode 210. Oh, I know some hardcore hunters that have taken shots, and it's not something to be taken lightly. Also from 210, you're a Canadian dwarf. Pugwaji. Who knows about you?
I'm an Asian giant in one episode and a Canadian dwarf the next.
And a Pugwaji the next. And finally, from episode 211, the laws of physics are a direct result of the perfect balanced relationship between space, time, matter, and energy.
Nice. That's a good way to sum it up.
Also from 211, space is nearly infinitely dense, matter is nearly infinitely empty, and time is probably nearly infinitely short.
That's another good one.
Also from up 211, wait, don't point at me. What the fuck's the time, Crystal? That's 2 quotes, and you've been getting pointy. You've been hanging around with Maurice too long.
I'm getting pointy because you're not looking or paying attention to what's going on over on the other side of the studio.
Behind me? You're not pointing at me, you're pointing past me?
No, I'm talking about, getting your attention. You got to put your phone, I'm going to ban your phone.
No, that's not going to happen.
I did one day, you let me, and it helped.
Yeah, that was just for the weather modification segment.
Oh, right. Yeah, I should do another one of those. Lots have been going on in the world of Climategate.
Climategate?
Yeah.
Climategate, Pizzagate, everything gate. So you want to talk about NASA?
Yeah, man. So, a mysterious NASA post has prompted ridiculous alien conspiracy theories. Now, this is coming from news.com.au again. It says, a mysterious NASA tweet has prompted wild theories about whether humans have finally gotten in touch with aliens. In a tweet posted this morning, the space agency said it will make an announcement tomorrow about a discovery beyond our solar system. And here's the exact tweet. It says, new discovery. We're announcing new findings on planets orbiting other stars tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. So by the time you listen to this, it's probably going to be a day or two after. So it'll be interesting to see if anything comes of it. It says here, it didn't offer much more detail other than to say it is specifically related to planets that orbit stars other than our own sun, known as exoplanets. But as vague as this preview is, it hasn't stopped people from launching into conspiracy mode about whether a real-life ET situation is about to unfold. Well, of course, people are going to speculate on that because why would NASA say that anyways? Oh, maybe they're getting ahead of Vault 7. Is that what you're thinking, Darren?
No, I think it's showing me they found water. They found liquid water someplace.
Huh. So you don't think it has anything to do with getting ahead of Vault 7?
No, I just noticed that today because randomly Cyrus had text earlier that tomorrow's the date that WikiLeaks was talking about.
Well, that's interesting. So what was this Vault 7 supposed to be?
Nobody knows.
Are you up to date on it?
Not really. I think it was just to do with Hillary's emails, probably.
Oh.
Still goes back to the email thing that there was a bunch of stuff. Like, I think it was all different codes for planes that were sold to the Chinese. Like, apparently there's some scandal that there's some plane bodies, like this new Chinese plane is almost identical to the U.S.
The F-22 Raptor or
something like that, yeah. And they think that someone sold plans to the Chinese.
Oh, okay.
And that's what, I mean, I haven't really done my own breakdown. It's either that or 9/11 is what it really seemed like. I don't see how any of those could have pointed to a rock slamming into the earth or aliens, which seem to be the only two things of any real importance NASA might be revealing. Unless they're going back to the moon, but that's not happening either,
Or Pizzagate.
NASA ain't talking about Pizzagate.
True. Not in that way, but, yeah.
I just thought it was weird because you mentioned the NASA thing just at the same time as I was kind of looking past my text thread in Cyrus's. That was the last thing you texted me.
Right.
Or maybe the WhatsApp or something.
I mean, if it was big enough news, it could get enough coverage to drown out something else, Especially something like Vault 7 that's just coming from WikiLeaks or alternative internet sources, right?
Aliens. That would do it.
That would have to be that big, and they wouldn't put that in here as a little teaser if it was that. So I wonder what it would be then. So water, maybe it's just more stars in the habitable zone.
We already know about that.
Or maybe they found.
That wouldn't be a huge,
clouds.
A major announcement or a major discovery.
I wonder
Could
why.
Could be Earth 2, maybe, right?
Could it be Sirius? That's why it's covered up? Maybe they found something on Sirius?
What I was reading is that Sirius is probably covered up just because it's so bright.
Oh my God. You can't be serious.
It's just too bright. It is the brightest star.
I bet. Okay, here. So if you search Venus on that, and that pops up, Venus is way brighter than any star right now, or it was last month.
To us.
What was the
I can't remember.
Google Sky? Right?
Was it?
Yeah. So somebody, you just paste something over it because it's too bright? I don't know. That just doesn't make sense.
Well, I don't think you just paste something over it if you're trying to be sneaky either.
How does this thing work? So how come I'm not searching? How did you get right up into it like that
I don't
last
know.
time?
I just typed Venus. Doesn't seem to be working this time.
No. So what did you do before? You typed in Sirius?
Yes.
Sirius. And it's it's a big pasty block. Yeah.
Maybe it is something to do with Sirius. Maybe Sirius is blowing the fuck up. That'd be cool. We're going to get to go see a star go supernova.
So Venus doesn't work because it's too bright, maybe.
No, then it'd be blotched. That was if you types Mars.
I just did it. I just typed Mars. How'd you know I was going to use Mars?
It's the next closest planet. It was, I would
What
say
did I
the
just use again?
Mercury.
Jupiter.
To get more stupider. So you're going in order away from the sun.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you might go proximity to Earth.
So it's not doing our own planets.
No.
No, that's a conspiracy. Because they're flat.
That's right. They can't see them because the camera sees them on the other way because they're flat.
turning around.
Yeah. They're paper thin. They're there, but they're paper thin.
What's another star?
I think that
Aldebaran?
Alpha Proximi,
Aldebaran.
Alpha Centauri.
No results. I don't spell it right. Alpha Centauri? Alpha Centauri. How do you spell Centauri?
Centauri.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's bright. That's pretty bright.
Not as bright as Sirius. So Sirius is the brightest star in the sky. Are you just having trouble sharing your screen?
Yeah, it's not working.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's not working. Who told you that theory?
Hey Siri, what's the brightest star?
No, I'm asking you who told you. You came up with that on your own, that it's covered up because
entry
of...
about brightest star on Wikipedia. Shall I read it to you?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Brightest Star is the debut mini-album from vocal group Bright. This was their first CD released under major label Rhythm Zone.
Nice
What's
try.
the brightest star in the night sky?
It's an album.
Looking. Okay, I found this on the web for what's the brightest star in the night sky.
Wikipedia. Here's the list. Here's the list. The sun, then Sirius. By a lot. Like double the next one.
And you just figured that that's why they block it out, because it's too bright?
Yeah, what else did you type in the sun?
Nothing.
Oh, this thing's the worst.
I want to see another star close up. Well, I just did an Alpha Centauri.
This isn't a real telescope. You think you're aiming a telescope?
No. It's all database stuff, right?
Or it's all CGI. Looks pretty CGI.
You think you're aiming at you're not aiming at a telescope, are you?
No. Yeah.
Anyways, I'm going to link to Google Sky so people
Well,
can
maybe
play
that's
around
why
with
it's
it.
not working, because I'm trying to pull it one direction and you're pulling. Anyway. Hey, if you like this bullshit, check out grimerica.ca/support. There's a bunch of different options there, guys, on how you can support our can't talk right.
Value for value.
Support our value for value model and our vow of poverty, as it were, and help us, stay away from the ads.
Yeah.
We want to stay ad free. We want to stay paywall free,
Sponsor free,
bullshit free. We just want to give you all this shit for free. And if you guys like it and find some value, then if you can afford it, from time to time, you can pitch in one time, or maybe you can sign up for a monthly. Those people really help out. But anyway, you can find all those different options at grimerica.ca/support. It does really helps pay the bills, helps grow the show, helps us expand and upgrade equipment and all that fun stuff. I don't know, we don't really do anything. Like, should we mention when people donate?
Oh yeah, we didn't really hear back since we talked about it last episode. And also we're doing a meetup in Washington, right?
Was that last episode? I remember at some point we had mentioned like how we would thing. Like, I'm fine, listing the list of the people who subscribe someplace or mentioning them, or maybe we can do shout outs or once a month. But anyway, if you guys have any ideas on that, let us know what you think.
Yeah, or if just keep it the same. I mean, a lot of people say keep it the same, but I don't think it's in reference to that specifically.
Yeah, that's right.
What else?
We are going to be in Spokane the weekend of March 3rd for a couple of days. We do have a big cabin rented. So I rented a big cabin there in the woods. So if you want to come out and get killed, let us know. Spam Graham.
Shoot some Sasquatch. Save some Sasquatch.
No, we'll probably be doing some podcasting, some chatting, some beers, some buds, all that fun stuff.
Some of you will.
Some food. Graham will be chaperoning organized chaos.
I'll be driving designated driver everywhere.
Everywhere. I got to write it down for this. Graham will just be driving back and forth.
Yeah.
So if you need a lift from the airport to the bus station, any of that fun stuff, let us know. No, just kidding. We're not going to drive you. But if you want to come to the meetup, that's fine.
The other thing is the show notes has a link to all the stuff to help support the show and ways to get a hold of us. Darren's on Twitter and I'm on Instagram and Spamgram with all your stories, and we talk about listeners' stories, synchronicities, encounters, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and remember we're coming up on March, which is Double Up Month. We'll try and double our listenership. So everybody's mission in March is to convince somebody else to start listening to the show.
Yeah. Sign them up to the newsletter too.
Sign them up for the newsletter. All right, guys. I think that's about it. Enjoy the chat with David. It's a great one. And it'll be a blast. We had fun.
All right. Tonight we've got David Charles Plate with us. He's a synchro-mystic filmmaker, and he's co-host of Always Record, podcast I've been listening to lately. And that gets published on a platform called Syncbook, which is a website, kind of a multimedia platform with videos and podcasts and all kinds of stuff. So he's a contributor there, and he's working on his own films, and we're happy to have him here. It sounds like he's got a pretty similar style to us, and tries to have open-minded conversations and not too dogmatic about stuff. So welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, good to meet you. So
yeah, happy to be on.
Yeah, I was listening to some of your stuff, man, on the Syncbook, and it was really, it took me a few episodes. I kind of tried some of the different ones, and the Always Record there, like, it just really resonated with me on the way we kind of talk about things here as well. I really like the open-minded conversations you guys are having.
Cool. Yeah. No, I like a roundtable discussion. I'm down with the more interview style format, but I really like to have a genuine conversation. That's where it's at.
Yeah. And you guys did that for a few years?
Yeah, I think it's been going on for like over 4 years now or something. There's kind of like, there's these people that just, we took a long break for a minute, and some folks decided to just kind of like make their own episode of our show, which was really cool. Cause So they became like the bizarro always record and just like like started producing episodes, and we're like, okay, well, we'll let them run with it. So like it's kind of been going back and forth where it's like, there's the old co-hosts and we'll jump on and do things every so often, and then they've kind of taken over to a degree, which I really like.
Was it a hostile takeover?
No, not at all. In fact, it was kind of like a joke. It was like if you're waiting for your show to come out and you just like produce your own episode because you're, So yeah,
that's actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work on Syncbook then? Because actually, should we mention what we're planning, Darren, or just
sure?
We should now. So how does it work with, or how do you find it working with a platform like Syncbook? So I go into that podcast and there's different styles or different flavors of podcasts within that, with different hosts and stuff, right?
Well, we with that particular show, the intention was just to be a think tank for other people's work and to kind of like, brainstorm. So, there's so much information that we're dealing with, and it's like, because we're not into jumping to conclusions necessarily, or at least that's like I was saying, that's kind of our mission statement. It's like we just explore the whole field, and you end up finding things that really are not easily explained. And so like, if there wasn't that, openness to whatever it could be, it wouldn't be as likely that would happen the way that it does. It's because anything is possible that we find things that are just like, how does that happen? How can you explain that? And so, I could go into loads of examples, but like, there's certain things that are just blown my mind. Like, I don't know how it is that 666 days after Stanley Kubrick dies is 1101, so January 1st, 2001, and 666 days before he died was the day and year that the first computer beat a man at chess. And so the computer is named Big Blue, designed by IBM. HAL is each one letter removed from IBM, and then the first representation of a computer beating a man at chess is in 2001, A Space Odyssey. And so it's just like, that's like my go-to example of like, explain this, and you can't, and I don't even, you follow along and you can look at, you can speculate on intentionality when it comes to what we could call certain synchronicities, but sometimes you reach a crescendo or a breaking point where it just like goes beyond like anything you could easily like explain, and I like that,
Yeah, somebody wasn't in control of that one. You can just tell that wasn't designed. That's a crazy example of.
Well, I don't know, man. The HAL and IBM thing almost seems like, something seemed to be up with Kubrick.
Oh,
something
right. Well, that's the thing. Both are happening at the same time. And so that's, as far as I can tell, I don't know. But that's what, like, you're going along and you find things where you can see that there's in all likelihood, especially if you know the backstory, you can see levels of intentionality. Now, when it extends beyond that, it's almost like, is it the intention of them just having an intention in the first place, being subversive in the first place, and then it extends beyond, it's like, I don't know if you're familiar with like Scott Onstott's work, with Secrets in Plain Sight, but like, he's measuring out, sacred sites in the sites themselves and then measuring the distance between sites that have resonance across the globe. And he's finding these like extremely significant, undeniable patterns. But then you keep going along with his work and you can just be like, okay, Freemasons. Okay. I get it. And then he's all of a sudden towards the end, he's like measuring the farthest distance of the sides of the continents and coming up with like crazy consecutive numbers. Like how could that happen? And it's like, nobody decided how long the continent would be, as far as I know, at least no intelligence that we would relate to is, it's like.
I was thinking of it.
That fucking really sounds simulation-y to me.
Right?
It makes you seem like it's because, then it would just like 26.26262626 miles or.
Right.
I don't know. I was thinking more of a tulpa-ish. Like it sounds like with that intentionality you're talking about, that it creates its own living dynamic energy or something, and it continues on with that. Like, have you ever heard of the tulpa phenomenon?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It reminds me of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think about especially nowadays, like talking about not jumping to conclusions in truth? How important is that mission statement or philosophy nowadays, especially with, all this alternative facts jumping out at you and fake news and all this stuff where, there's all these supposed facts, yet truth is kind of more subjective, it's based on perception and all this other stuff. I mean, it's super important just to not be so polarized, because it seems like that's what's happening to everybody.
Right. There's the information and there's what you extrapolate from it. So like, I'm like, okay, so Trump is inaugurated on the 70th year, 7th month, 7th day, I believe, of his life. And like, you can cross-reference that. Like, you can go and you can, there's a date calculator and you can type it in there and you can look at what comes up, and it's like, okay, I see that. And it's a 666th, month of, Barack Obama is like when he leaves office. It's like, but the numbers are open to interpretation. They're just numbers. I mean, the big point is that we discovered numbers. We didn't invent them, right? So like, we invented the symbols to represent those numbers, but numeration itself, you can find patterns everywhere in nature. And we relate to our own goings on as if that's somehow like completely separate. Yet there's implications when you follow things through that it doesn't seem like it's, it's distinct apparently, but it doesn't seem to be entirely separate, because we can't necessarily remove ourselves. Like, that's the thing. Like, I'm like, is that planned that it's going to be that 777 thing with Trump? And like, and then you have to, look at like, well, what associations do the occultists have with 777? And then you see that, traditionally there's certain views, and in European occultism, they have a whole, like Kabbalah is a strange term, because it's the way that we relate to it now. Like, if you have a cabal, you have secret, meetings, people, a cabal. But that, like, Kabbalah literally means to receive. Like, the traditional meaning of Kabbalah is entirely different than the way that it's currently taken. And traditionally, you look at like the relationship to a mystery, something's mysterious, and then now you have people's relationship to a secret, like they have this secret knowledge. Yet that doesn't seem to be like, it's an open secret, really, like in the more traditional sense. And so it's like, we're not even talking about the same thing anymore. And so that can be really difficult, especially when you look at the way that the names used to be related to and the way that they're related to now. I don't know if you're familiar, like if you take, the tarot arcana, the 22 trump cards in particular, and you lay them out as a Vesca Pisces. This is something I'm absolutely fascinated by.
Okay.
Is, you have an 11 above and an 11 below, so to speak. So,
yeah.
And if you lay that out normally, because this is the roots of language, right? It's the original alphabet. The original alphabet was Hebrew. And then that came from the Phoenician and the Chaldean roots. And then you can see those are communicated through the letters themselves. They're also musical. They're all musical notes. And so you have these scales and whatnot. But when you lay them out normally as the 22 arcana, you have the letters that are flanking it being Aleph on one side and Lamed on the other. Now, that's the Fool in tarot is the way that would later be associated on the left, and then on the right you have Lamed, which is justice. And so that's that's Elohim. It's an abbreviation of Elohim. So here you have the name of God embedded in the language, and like that, it's very significant symbology too, and how those pathways show up on the Kabbalistic tree, because you have the 22 pathways that connect together all the Sphirot. I don't know if how familiar you are with the Kabbalistic tree, anyways,
not very.
It holds a significance, but they relate to that. This is the most direct gate. This is a direct path, and then there's a prophecy in the Zohar about how this will be changed and how to tell if they're correct or not in the ultimate sense, but just in terms of like, does this function even though it's not this? Like, it distributes energy in different ways. And so that was Crowley's big thing, and Saudi is not the star. So he switched up the arcana, and he didn't really do this like this. He's giving expression or articulation to something that's already in place. It's like a compulsion that people have to manipulate the name, and that's the basis of like the Tower of Babel. It's like no one can understand each other's speech when the tower collapsed, and this whole idea. And so it's literally like you're changing all the assumptions that everybody has in relationship to language. Like language assumes certain things in the way that words are communicated, like how you relate to words, like noun, subject, this whole, what is, what in order to speak, you have to have certain assumptions about reality, right? And then that's embedded into the language. So it becomes really significant. Like if you're looking at, how to control masses of people, that would be a very direct way to do it, is to kind of determine what the whole how the system operates.
Yeah.
And so what Crowley actually did with the letters is you can see on one side you have Resh, which is the sun now flanking it instead of Aleph, the fool. And then opposite that you have strength, or Oz, in Hebrew Oz, strength. Yakin and Boaz are the two pillars of the temple, and the two pillars of the Kabbalistic tree of the terrestrial realm, right, of the seven lower sphirot. So you have that. So you have the sun and Leo. So the sun on one side, and then Leo as strength on the other, and Leo rules the sun. And so his switching of the Tzadi is not the star. It's kind of I relate to it as a massive con, because it's like, this is okay, all the letters in my book are right, but Tzadi is not the star. Okay, so you're taking the name that was like revered as like the name of God traditionally, and you're saying, okay, well, there's something wrong with this. It's like, oh, really? What's wrong with it? But his system works. It's just, that's like the meaning of the septogram. It's like a hexagram is in perfect equilibrium because it's a perfect vector metric. Every line is the same length. Even if you connect lines, connecting on the outermost points, those will all be the same length too. So it's like, it's a image of, equilibrium. And so if you introduce distortion of that, it's going to compensate through equal measure from all possible points. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so the septogram is like an image where you're looking at something that you can see overtly is not in equilibrium, yet it functions. And so then that becomes the symbol of Babel, because you're like, okay, well, we're replicating a pattern that exists in nature, which you could say the 777 lightning flash. If you add up the letters of the lightning flash of the Kabbalistic tree, I don't know, it's a zigzag through the tree. That, the Golden Dawn relates to, all these people relate to this thing. But this is a very old communication, most likely, from Egypt, and who knows before that or whatever, but it's there's a phenomenon that exists, and this is rather complicated, but I'll drop it on you if you're.
Yeah. No, go for it.
So, basically, if you take the diagonal pathways of the Kabbalistic tree, you'll notice there's 12 of them. And so if you add up the gematria, the values of those letters, of those 12, you end up with 865. Now, if you add the Gimel, which is, what connects Keter, the crown, to Tiferet in the center of the tree. So in other words, what's the vertical line that's connecting the supernal to the terrestrial. If you add that, you get 868, which is the geometrical value of from the first line of the Sefer Yetzirah, the name for the mystical pathways. I don't know if I have Sefer Yetzirah right in front of me. That would be helpful.
How do you spell iconic?
Iconic?
The tree. I'm just looking for an image of the tree.
Oh, of the Kabbalistic tree? Yeah. Kabbalah Tree of Life. Tree of Life, you'll find it, yeah. And so, yeah, there's all these attributions. And so, but basically the point is that I was looking at a prophecy. I spent the last 3.5 years transcribing it with my rabbi, and we went through, and we came to this point where it was describing in the future to how to tell how the occultists in the future will be relating to the sustaining order of the Kabbalistic tree. So there's two orders of the Sphirot. The way that things come into form on an organic level, and the way that the empire sustains its power. And so basically, this is indicative of the sustaining order, the 12 diagonals. But you'll see that when you're looking at the upper part of the tree, you have, a triad, and then below you have a reverse triad of the upper spheres of the lower worlds. Now, this is without question the meaning of the square and compass in Freemasonry. Huh. And so what connects them together, that vertical pathway, is Gimel. It's a G. And so this is why when you see that G in Freemasonry, people say geometry, they say God, whatever. It's Gimel. It's would be associated in tarot with the high priestess, and so it indicates the exile of Shekinah. So you have the sacred feminine being pushed to the bottom as Malkut, so that the empire can basically maintain its power structure. And so the Shekinah represents receptivity in the highest sense, because Kabbalah, like I said, it means to receive. And so that's space. It's actually, the symbolism is this is controversial, but it would actually be closer to what we say, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Nut, the sky goddess, the Egyptian sky goddess, is communicated as infinite space, right? So it's basically taking that space and it's pushing it to the bottom, and then everything gets built up on top of it. And so this is a verse from the Old Testament where it says the stone that the builders rejected will be the keystone of the temple or archway. So basically, if you have an archway and you have a center stone in the middle of that archway, all the weight rests upon that stone. And so the verse and the prophecy that they relate to is that this stone that's been rejected by the builders will eventually get back to its rightful place in the center of the tree and bring the other sphera with it to create another level of equilibrium. So basically, the tree itself, as you're seeing it, is ultimately an imbalance, because you have Da'at is the knowledge in the center that separated the supernal from the terrestrial. In other words, like as soon as you replicate something in terms of like information, like if you get a piece of information, you're making a replication to relate to, and then that becomes a projection. And so in that movement of projection, like, small children do this. It's like developmentally, when we separate ourselves from ourselves psychologically, that comes with a sense of guilt, or a sense of like something's wrong. And no matter how subtle or whatever, there's that sense that, wait a minute, something's not right. And so that traditionally is communicated that that's the fall, and everything extends from there. And so, obviously organized religion has kind of screwed this up, because there's very little communication around like the actual philosophy behind that. Even though it's ultimately really straightforward. I mean, that's why we have confessional, it's because they want to create a gap between us and the direct path. So like I say, Gimel is like, those are dimensions. So when you're looking at the horizontal pathways, the diagonal pathways, and the vertical pathways, those indicate, things that are transcendent, or things that are on a linear level. And so the horizontal is obviously linear, and that's why you see strength. Oz is what connects, Chesed and Gevurah, mercy and severity, the tops of the terrestrial pillars of the tree of life. Now, when that guy walked across the two towers on that wire, like the fact that apparently he didn't realize the symbolism involved in that. I mean, I don't know. I never spoke to him, but like that's super profound. Kabbalistically, because that pathway is the strength of the empire. So it's like the equivalent of in the Golden Bough, where the fool or the stranger comes in and he challenges the king by pulling the limb off of the tree. That's essentially what he did. It's a demonstration that, your power isn't what it claims to be. It's not, Yeah. And so another example would be that kid who climbed the Trump Tower. The fact that he's oblivious makes it all the more profound. Like, he went 21 stories. Like, you have 22 arcana and the fool is 0. So like, he's the fool and he climbs the Trump Tower. Those are Trump cards. Like, and then that's the basis of all language. Like, I mean, on every level, it's just nuts.
So what do you think the significance of that is compared to the tower example? Like, that compared to the Twin Tower example? Right.
Well, it's the same thing. Same thing, but from a different angle, because it's all about the tower. So the tower being being the mouth. What Crowley did when he switched Sadi is not the star. Sadi means fishhook, and was connected to the star card in tarot. Now he attributes that to the emperor, which is Aries. And so the tower is Mars. Aries rules Mars. So just like I was saying with the flanking letters of the Vesca Pisces of the Arcana, you have the sun on one side and Leo on the other. The equivalent happens when he basically pairs, because like you ignore the Roman numerals, you just look at the Hebrew letters of the Arcana, and then it all makes sense, because you can see he put Aries next to Mars. Well, Aries rules Mars, which is a fish hook next to a mouth. And so you have the emperor connected with the tower. And so it's Tisha B'Av, it's the destruction of the temple. And so what the Zohar prophecy actually explicitly communicates is that these two towers that collapse it gives the exact day of 9/11 in 2001. I don't know if you knew that. It gives what appears as a random date in the Hebrew calendar, and then you apply it to the Gregorian, and you can see that this is in fact it is precise. And so there's a little tricky thing in there because it's dealing with Shabbat and where this day lands in regards to. So basically, it's a little complicated, but I've written this whole thing out. I spent the last 3 years transcribing this in longhand. I got a friend right now helping me type it out, but it's crazy. It also predicts the day of the establishment of the TSA, and so it says 68 days after these towers collapse. The nation who has this happen will show up at the border of every nation around the world to impose unjust laws. And so I'm like, I look at this in the prophecy. I'm like, don't tell me it's the day the TSA got established. Don't tell, and I go to look it up. And without question, 68 days exactly after this happens is exactly what they said would happen. And so So this is where you're talking about the future being predicted through this tree, right? Is this what you're talking about, or is there other future stuff that you're trying to unwind now that can give us a hint to where the empire's going? I mean, is there a chance that the empire doesn't get strength through this, that it collapses, or? Well, that it basically the thing transmutates, and we transmutate. It's a reflection of our own consciousness, and so what we're seeing through the Qliphothic lens. So the Qliphoth, the influencing intelligences when we're approaching, it's like a screen between us and what's actually in front of us or what's actually within us,
Right.
And so basically it has to mirror the Tetragrammaton, and it can only get so close. And because it can only get so close, it's destined to eventually collapse. Because if you're putting all your stock into something that's a replication, you know that it won't endure. And so this was like in ancient times, they had a matriarchy. So you challenge the king and you marry the king's daughter if you defeat him in combat. And sometimes this would just be done in a ritualistic way, like there is no question, and so it had to be a complete outsider that did this action. Now, when you see the footage of Bohemian Grove, and what they're doing with the cremation of care ceremony, that is a mock version of the of this ritual. So it's the same thing like when if you ever watch the fucking Wicker Man or whatever, like in the Wicker Man, they have the outsider and they burn the outsider. So they're killing the fool instead of having him kill the king. And so it's a poetic communication. So instead of it has to do with inbreeding. So like traditionally, like they didn't want to keep the power in the same bloodline indefinitely because they knew that would lead to trouble. And then that is also a reflection of the whole empire. Like the whole empire is communicated with the health of the king, like is this whole thing. And so they would literally like invite the whole structure to be rejuvenated by being turned on his head. And so you basically have this person who comes in, he challenges the king, he defeats the king, he marries the king's daughter, but because he's of the lowest class and he's a complete outsider, he will, re-establish the whole kingdom to be something else. And so what we're seeing in the world, as far as I can tell, is like basically a complete aversion to allowing this thing to take place.
Right.
And so it gets further and further strained until it just forces itself to and they relate this in Zohar that, you have bitter judgments or you have sweet judgments. If you go through the first gate, the judgments are going to be sweet. If you start manipulating and directing energies to suit different people, so it becomes there's an inequality, and that the top of the pyramid like is ignoring the base of the pyramid, doesn't realize that it's dependent upon it, then you end up with bitter judgments. And so we don't want to face this, but it seems like that's what's happening. It's funny, I say I don't want to jump to conclusions, but certain information just like culminates and builds on itself, and it reaches a point where I'm like, okay, that seems to be what's going on.
Well, I was just going to ask a question, and you sort of already answered it. Is this how do I even say the word? Are these occult symbols or occult synchronicities almost increasing? It sure seems like it to me. Like you're seeing it throughout. You just mentioned a bunch right there, but there's a whole bunch with Keck and Pepe and
sure.
I mean, it goes on and on and on. So is that sort of what you're saying is a sign that this is shifting? Because of that? Right.
Well, if you don't if there's nothing you can really, I don't know. It's kind of like take a position. It feels so real. It's like, I mean, with Pepe, it's weird because as soon as I saw Pepe, I was like, Pepe? Like Pe is the tower. And the letter Pe corresponds to the tower. And so I see Pepe, I see two towers. Like, and the point at which Hillary came forward and called Pepe a Nazi supremacist, she's talking about a cartoon. Like, that's the level that things have gotten to. Like, she's looking at a cartoon figure come up by, whatever, internet nerds, whatever. And she's saying this cartoon is a white supremacist and being super serious about it. And that comes out on 9/11, the same day that she had her little fall.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right, and as soon as I see her logo, her campaign logo, with those, apparently I'm like, am I looking at two pillars with a red arrow going to the right? And I'm like, is that Gevurah going to Chesed? Like, is that is that the severity going to the mercy? Because this is the prophecy is very, it has this whole thing about the hemispheres of the collective brain, right? So it's saying that, we used to be, for lack of a better word, right brain dominant, right? So we were, in a sense, psychic or whatever. And over time, we've moved further and further to the left. So the left is, basically trying to conquer the right. And so it's saying that, on a collective level, it reaches a crescendo, a zenith point where it's finally okay, now's the time to cross over. And it communicates this with the destruction of these towers. So it's saying in the years that follow the destruction, that we go to make this movement on a collective level. But what we don't realize, what we're oblivious to, is that the left brain is actually comes second in the formative order. So in that lightning flash, like Keter, the crown has two right sides. It's a paradox. And so basically it starts with the right and then the left replicates and then it continues on with that process. Right, left, right, left, right, left. But it's the fact that basically it's its own foundation. So it's okay, you're going to conquer your foundation. And I believe that this, in all likelihood, this is what is communicated with love is the law, love under will from Aleister Crowley, because then it becomes a question of well, what's in power? People assume that if something's on top of something, that it's in the place of power. But if it's on top of it, then it's dependent upon what's below it. And so if so where, it just really becomes a question of what is power, and we have these assumptions and our whole empiric structure is based on these assumptions and it moves forward in the midst of them. And so, maybe there's something completely foundational that's, not just not being questioned, but not being acknowledged in any real way. We go to war based on this idea of what needs to be done to maintain the power. It's it's insane, so yeah. Did I answer you? I don't even know.
Yeah. No, I think so. I just wondered if you thought there was a definite increase in occult synchronicities or symbolism. And I think that, you answered that. Especially with all this, I don't even know if we want to go down that
so is it all by
the
design
Pizzagate
then?
stuff as well. Well, some of it is probably, but the Hillary logo is, but the stuff that happens, like her saying that on 9/11, that can't be by design.
Right.
Well,
That's what I'm saying. Maybe it can. Maybe
when you tell me 9/11's written into some Jewish book, maybe that's by design.
Right, so this is, they communicated the 216 letter name. I don't know. So, in the book of Exodus, there's 3 verses in a row that are all 72 letters. And if you've ever seen the film Pi.
Isn't 72's important for another reason, right? 72.
Yeah, 72 names of God.
And 72 is also the number of years in 1 degree of the
calendar, the procession.
Yeah.
Right. There's a phenomenon where if you take 8 trees of life and you group them into a circle and they all meet at the center point of Keter, so the crown in the center, you end up with 72 Sphirot. And so this becomes, the 72 names of God and all of this. So it's a point of that 72 is the geometrical value of Chesed. So the top of the right pillar of the Kabbalistic tree, that's mercy. And so opposite that is Gevurah, 216. So you have 72 times 3 equals 216, and there's 3 pillars. So, and then 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. And so the geometrical value of Gevurah is also the geometrical value of a man in Hebrew, how you'd say a man. And this is why in the New Testament, in Revelations, when it says this is the number of a man, behold, this is wisdom, all of that, it's actually, even though it's Greek, it's referring to the Hebrew gematria. And so that's why it says divide, add, multiply, and understand, because you can see 6 times 6 times 6 is 216. So it's telling you what it's referring to, what the beast is. And this is communicated in the Ba here as being a big red eye. Also, that pathway that connects the two is related to as a birth canal. And so they say, like, at this time, we're basically like going through contractions of giving birth to the next species. And so that it's relates then to the fall, because they're saying like this doesn't have to be a painful process, but because of our compulsions, we make it so. And so that literally like we're pushing this child out. And it's also emphasizing the idea of mutation. So like when we see signs of mutation, it's like terrifying. But we're looking at the skin of a snake. And so like we're the body of the snake in the midst of that, but like we look at the most topical level as if it's the most significant. Kind of like what I was saying before, like you're taking something that's secondary to something else as though it were primary. And so like everything is backwards. And so that then relates to the Klipot and why it's a skewed reflection of ourselves. So like basically our body is moving forward ahead of our own perceptions. And so like we're like, it's hard to explain, but we're like ahead of ourselves because our skin is actually shedding, but we're looking at the shedding skin and we're terrified of it. So it's saying that there's this governing intelligence behind material existence and organic expression, and that, you know, despite the most topical what we see, that ultimately, you know, everything gets reintegrated. It's just you have to back up far enough to see, you know, what will be in time. And like in a sense, like I would say, oh well, that's kind of like you know, being like, oh well, we couldn't see like the dinosaurs couldn't see us coming. You know what I mean? Like yeah, it's assuming like the dinosaurs had intelligence like we did. If they were trying to, you know, relate, like conceptualize, like, oh my God, what's going to happen to us? And like, you know, in the prophecy, it's heavily focused on the nullification of the Klipot. And so literally like, and that's considered like reptilian. And so like, there's like this reptilian aspect of it aspect of us that's being nullified over a long course of time. And that, you know, something else emerges, but that thing that emerges is unknown. Like, because, you know, things like everything is built on top of the last thing. So like, just like, you know, this country, like in America, you know, we killed off the Indians, but like they're still here in a sense, and we're aware of it. It's a large part of like what the film The Shining is about. You know, it's and not just with the Indians, but all over the place. Whatever you do, you know, it's embedded in the next thing. And so like we have like the dinosaurs in us as our reptilian brain. Like it has like, that's one place where I'm like, I think people really misunderstand David Icke's stuff. Cause I'm not like promoting David Icke, but right. There's a certain, you know, aspect of it that it feels hard to deny in terms of the reptilian parts of ourselves, you know.
Yeah, and it could be an evolved consciousness, like, or what we were talking about this before, Darren, with traits that evolve through, like, almost like Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance, right? Like, we have these traumatic memories through generation after generation that we still have, and that could be where some of that reptile fear comes from as well. And it seemed like you were talking about a metaphor for us waking up as a society, and I feel like even though this latest few months has sort of polarized everybody, it's also really shed some light on a lot of stuff that's been hidden, and people are waking up. I feel like you're just talking about a metaphor of that. Like, and if we can get to a minimum percentage, like a tipping point, maybe that's 5%, 1%, 10%. Who knows? Maybe that'll tip the boat.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're looking for solutions and through the left brain, and it can give solutions, but it can't give like an ultimate solution, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's like it does its best, but its best is never going to be good enough, and that's the problem, because it's not foundational, and that's difficult, and all the contradictions are being shown right now. I mean, this is the thing, is like it's emphasizing this. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep focusing on this Zohar prophecy because I'm pretty damn obsessed with it, and I've been obsessed with it for a while because it lays certain things out there, you know, and it's describing these variables. So we're looking at what's the movement towards a one world government. It's emphasizing that.
Wow.
And then it's saying that this one world government is the result of these buildings being collapsed because the nation uses this as a springboard, and that this is the same reoccurring phenomenon that we've seen throughout time, where masses of people get manipulated through a traumatic event. And so it's basically saying that there's these variables that exist. One is the tears of the soldiers. So it's describing like all these soldiers ready to go to war in the same way they had to 2 previous times prior. So it literally says 2 global wars before this event. It's fucking crazy. Excuse me. I don't know. Is it okay to say the F word?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so basically, it's saying people were able to be manipulated to go along with this program. And then after this event, that the actual prophecy states that the king dies of that nation. It says the ruler dies. But then when you look at the commentary from the Ramak in the 16th century, which as far as I know has never been translated into English, other than myself and my teacher,
wow.
At least not for the public. Even though this is text, I need to qualify. This is text is referenced by every secret, not so secret society. So whether you're talking about the Golden Dawn, the OTO, Freemasonry, whatever, they're all drawing upon Zohar. And this is the only prophecy that I know of that exists in Zohar. My teacher's been studying it for years and years and years, and he's never heard of another one. And so, it has this whole thing where it's like the leader that dies on that day is actually, they say Samael. So it's a Samek Mem. It's the governing intelligence of the Klipot. So basically, like everyone sees something, but that their right brain knows what they saw, but their left brain can't come to terms with it. So it's describing this cognitive dissonance, and it says that there's a lag time that exists after this thing takes place for people to come to terms with what they saw that day.
Huh.
And so that our coming to terms with what we saw is coincident with this movement towards this one world government, and that when the moment that we actually get that one world government, that's the tipping point. So when I was describing the left side thinks it's going to swallow up the right side, but then it itself gets swallowed and transmutates into this other thing and pushes out the next species. It's relating that this movement, when that finally happens, is coincident with basically all of our greatest fears in terms of one world government. And so it has this whole thing with the tears of the soldiers standing there and unable to participate in what they had before because they see straight through it.
Right.
And then it also has the prayers of the small children. They're saying that basically the children have been, wronged. They're in a,
that's interesting.
Right. That everyone is forced to reflect because of the children and their prayers.
No way.
And then the third thing that I saw, and this is spread throughout the text, I was keeping my eye out for variables, because it seems like, okay, well, this is going to happen, but what is different, And the other thing is the young scholars. So it's saying that the old scholars relate to things in a certain way, but that the people who are doing research influence the way that it plays out as well. And so, yeah, I thought.
So what was the third one? The young researchers? No.
Yeah, the young scholars. Yeah,
young scholars. Okay.
Yeah, pretty
that's
far out.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. So that could be anything from, I don't know, the new media or the new generation, or just the collapse of the old. This is so interesting. So that's kind of what I was going to ask you: is what was there a timeline, of events that happened
when we
in the
did
future?
our show on Pepe and Keck? And
Yeah.
it just so happened that we randomly released it the same day as THC.
Yeah.
And neither, no one knew we were having the same guy on, just poof, and they both released the same day.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it seems as though that there's some energy moves according to the whims of the great magnet, and sometimes you just can't. So this is my thing. I've produced over, I've uploaded, over 60 films, that are available on Syncbook Press, and they're all experiments with album and film pairing. So I've been working on that for over 20 years. That's been my number one activity in my life. It's just finding these correspondences that exist between these things and running experiments. And so basically, the success rate for what I consider uncanny resonances has increased dramatically over the last few years. So I would do this for days, and every so often I would come up with one. I would do this, and it would be okay, well, everything goes in sync with everything to some degree. Yeah. But I'm interested in that over the top where you're no, really, what the fuck?
Yeah.
How did that just happen? And so, yeah, and and I keep coming up against these serious, what the hell? And so I don't know necessarily what it would take. I have certain musician friends who are just oh yeah, well, why wouldn't they do that? And then I got a lot of friends who don't do that kind, who don't produce things like that, who are just like, why on earth would they do that? And it's like this crazy juxtaposition. And I find it really interesting that the majority of people that I share my experiments with, lean towards that's just coincidence, or like, are not, like if you say something's just a coincidence, that kind of downplays or whatever, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But like, it's like, when it crosses that line, and then you say, oh, well, then it's a synchronicity or it's cosmic. It's like, I'm not saying one is correct and one isn't, because I really don't know in a lot of cases. If I know a certain amount of the backstory, it just becomes like, kind of like, okay, like, but like, I find it really interesting that most people will see the more logical explanation being one of like cosmic profundity rather than mechanical intentionality, if you follow me.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and like, it becomes a question of like, well, what is the more rational explanation? Because, or is it both, or is it neither? I don't even,
Yeah, we do a segment on the show, and we have listeners who have just been sending us synchronicity stories for years now, and it's just nonstop. So we kind of do like a little rating thing where I'll read them out, and Darren will rate them just for fun. And so many of our guests have had major synchronicities that have started them on the path to the research that they're doing for, that we talk about on the show. Like, a lot of our guests that are into this interesting research have had major synchronicities that have either solidified their path or changed their path or, turned them on to this new thing. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, totally. So I just realized you had asked me something and I started in on it, and then I ended up on a tangent, which tends to happen here. About the 216 letter name, this is really significant. So the way that you would normally read the name in any kind, I don't know if you'd say a working or whatever, but it's like, you have these the 72 triplet, and so the first verse is read right to left. The second verse is read left to right. The third is read right to left again. And the way that the prophecy is relating to it is that these are these three pillars that are communicative of the tree of life, and that when we go to approach when we go to dig in to the reality, we're trying to see what's what, that we come up against a reversal. And so, that this is the second 72. And then like, basically like it's relating that is conspiracy, and that there are conspiracies, and that people are doing all kinds of, manipulative stuff, like both just even in themselves, and then by extension in the goings on of the world. They're basically corruption. So we go to dig and we find corruption. And then it's emphasizing this point that if you keep digging, that you end up coming to a place where, there's a higher order that exists back in the other direction behind that layer. It's hard to explain. I can't explain it as well as what I transcribed. But it's this principle of like, being like, okay, well, this is the reality. This is what we're dealing with. Everything appears to be going in one direction. And then you're like, wait a minute, and so people like talk about like taking the red pill. Like I'll hear fucking Alex Jones being like, take the red pill, all this stuff, and it's like, referring to the Matrix. And it's like, okay, well, relating to this is saying, well, you have that first movement and you've woken up, and people relate to waking up to seeing the corruption. And so, but then what the Zohar is relating is that, okay, no, that's the first stage. The second stage is seeing the profundity beyond what we can even, conceive. And so people, it's hard enough because people experience such cognitive dissonance just with that first step. Because when you see the corruption, it's like, oh my God, what's going on? And I think that people, the way that the dichotomy, and this is kind of divisive, is that to acknowledge how profound the correspondences are beyond that seems to be like it's one or the other, like that this negates that. Oh, which position do you take?
Right,
like someone can call me a synchromistic and think that somehow me being a synchromistic is negating the very, true corruption that's going on. Like, oh, so you prefer the happy reality of that there's a great magnet and everything has this divine order, and so that there's no, but the two are coexistent. One is foundational to the other, and that's a big point. So it becomes a question of like, what do you take as primary? So like I would take the synchronicity as primary. I would say correlation doesn't equal causation, and that should be something to remember all the way through that. Like if I'm going to follow this through, I got to consider that just because something correlates doesn't mean it's connected. I can say that it is, but that doesn't necessarily make it so. The term synchronicity came from a Beatle in Liverpool. I don't know if you know about this. So,
I don't think I do. Do you know?
Yeah.
Term?
So,
I thought it was Carl Jung or something like that.
Right. So Carl Jung was in Liverpool.
Really?
So there was a woman who was doing the couch trip thing, and he's sitting there, psychoanalysis. She's describing this dream where she had the scarab in a dream. And she's describing the scarab, and she's going into all these details around it. She's visualizing the scarab. Well, while she's talking, a beetle flies in the window, and she's got her eyes closed. Yeah, it's at the beginning of Synchronicity and a Causal Principle. And he grabs the beetle, and he does something against protocol. You're just supposed to sit there and listen, And he's like, open your eyes. And she opens her eyes, and she sees this beetle, and she's like, oh my God, But it was just because of what that did in her consciousness to have her something that she was drawing upon from a dream, and then to see it externalized had this effect, and that those shouldn't be linked. There is no rational explanation for her to be talking about this beetle and for the biggest scarab or the strangest scarab, I guess, that Jung had ever seen fly in the window at that moment. And he was so compelled, he didn't know what else to do to say, open your eyes, look at this, this is happening, and that was actually where the term synchronicity originated, was because of the effect that experience had upon him. And so then you go from there and you're like, isn't it crazy how much synchronicity surrounds the freaking Beatles from Liverpool? Like, it goes on for days. And, I had this impression, that the whole Paul is dead thing, I can entertain certain things, whatever. But I didn't realize that the most hardcore researchers who are generally much older, who have been following this for years, they're generally in agreement that Paul didn't die, but they're almost all in agreement that they had somebody who had gotten some kind of plastic surgery who would literally take his place for periods of time. And their rationale for that is actually pretty sane. Like, they're looking at, all of these photographs for days and days and days, and they're making comparisons, but the changes that they see in Paul stay completely consistent. So you could say, in a photograph, maybe shadows or maybe this or that. And it's like, no, it stays true, and it's only for these periods of time. And then it will go back and stuff. And so they're just, they're generally in agreement. So, I definitely going on a big tangent here, but I find it really interesting that it is a case where you're like, it seems as though that they were really trying to get people to question what was like, because it's like an authoritative thing, to be like, no, the Beatles are the Beatles. Like, here they are, here's what's going on with them, their whole lives are documented, Paul disappeared for a few years, and he came back and he looked different, and it's like really different.
And much shorter or taller or whatever.
Yeah, all kinds of things. Yeah, his chin, his eyebrows, his nose, all these things changed. But the point is like, people can't come to terms with the idea of like a really big lie. And people have a hard time, I think, recognizing that just because something's a big lie also doesn't mean that there's that many people in on it. How many people are on a need-to-know basis? Like, I doubt very much that George Bush knew anything about 9/11 before, during, or after. Like, what was that? Like, he looks pretty clueless during My Pet Goat, Also, I don't know. He doesn't look like he has any idea what the frick is going on. I'm like, I don't know, but it's like, I think that there's some value in keeping people in the dark.
Yeah, like, he might have known about certain levels of it, but I don't think he knew of the full, all the levels. Like, we had Joseph Farrell on, and he talked about the different levels of that conspiracy. And George could have been, aware of some of the sort of lower end ones, maybe.
Just that a plane would crash.
Or just that there was something going on with hijackers or terrorists. He could have been just in the know of there's going to be something happening,
Right.
But maybe there's especially with him, maybe there's more value in just keeping him in the dark.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm considering, And a lot of stuff I'm seeing in media and stuff, and all these actors and whatever, Like, I don't think that they're on a need to know basis around what is being conveyed in the Hollywood's own mythology. My first introduction to that idea was from my sister-in-law, who I haven't seen in a long time. But, she communicated to me that, she was in a small parts in a bunch of series of movies. And she was like, she was one of the three mermaids in the movie Hook that kisses Robin Williams, and then they had asked her to be one of the vampires in bed with Keanu Reeves in Bram Stoker's Dracula. And she swore to me, she was like, I'm convinced that the casting directors needed me to be one of those three vampires because I was one of the three sirens. And she was like, that was very important to them. And, I don't know, but the fact that she was so serious, adamant about that point, it really affected me, that the idea that Hollywood would have its own mythological way of relating to these things. And I think that that's a very common thing. And ultimately, like, I don't take that necessarily as all that malicious. I think that there's it's like people trying to initiate others without their knowledge. And I think that scares a lot of people. But it's kind of like, well, if you look at where we're at in terms of our symbol literacy, generally speaking, people aren't that symbol literate. I don't think when Hillary first saw her logo, she probably even knew what it really was going to mean for her. It's like, it's a time warp. It's just a step to the left, another step to the right. Like, we go around the circle and, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily malicious.
Looks like
either,
an airplane flying into a building too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying is like the symbolism of that. It's like, and also that you're going from the left to the right, not just in a political sense, but in a Kabbalistic sense. That's very significant because you're coming from a place of severity to attack the mercy, not realizing that the mercy is the foundation of the severity, like I keep saying. But that's what I see when I see that. And that's what 9/11 communicates. Is that, and like, this is my thing. This is one place where I would actually say, okay, well, this is my belief, is that, no sacrifices for naught. Like, I don't feel that those people's lives was for nothing. And like, I think it's absolutely, obviously beyond horrible, the things that we're doing and the things that are going on and whatever. But like, the fact is, these things are happening and have happened. And every false flag event, if people are actually harmed in that like in time, because of the nature of not just communications, but technology, like we're dropping the veil from like what stands between us and what's actually happening. Like, that's all contributing to that. Like, when you go over that video of that plane and the wing goes behind the building that it should be in front of during 9/11, like, you can see what they did. Like, there's so many people at the time that were like, that was a military aircraft. That was a black plane with no windows. All these people say that. So many people who witnessed it say that. And yet that's not what you see in the footage. But they used a different formatting than we use today for the layering. And so you can even see the line between the building and the plane. Like, they in real time inserted a fake plane over what was right in front of you. And like, we all watched that on the news, but it wasn't what was actually going on. But like, in time, that worked then when people were watching it live. But when you're going over it and over it, just like the Zapruder film, we can see it's been edited. The car slowed down dramatically, yet we see it going the same speed. But now with what we have, what our capabilities at this point to go back over that old footage, like, we can see what they did, how it was doctored. And so the same thing goes for 9/11. Same thing goes for a lot of these things. It's just like, we can see, you just give it some time. I mean, at this point, it's over 70% of the population, probably beyond that, but this is like, probably 10 years ago, doesn't believe the official story of the JFK assassination.
Yeah.
Now, how many people don't believe the official story of 9/11? 9/11 was impossible. It can't happen. It doesn't follow any rule of any standard demolition, and it sure as hell doesn't follow any rule of the official story. We're looking at buildings disintegrating, like, fast. There was 14 survivors in the second story of Tower 2. They describe light coming in from above, a couple of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, that can't happen. There was a row of cars that was completely burnt to a crisp right in front of the towers, directly next to a row of trees that are completely unsinged.
Yeah, and yet there's all this paperwork and dust floating around, but no metal, no steel,
right,
and no concrete, a bit of concrete left. But
down
really,
to ground zero, just like that. Like there's photographs on ground zero of that day, and you can see
buildings
across the thing, and you can see like street level things.
Yeah, it's impossible, and yet it happened. And people are all assuming that they know what, they think they know what the technology is. And it's like, no, we've seen in Gaza, we've seen in Iraq, a lot of technology being used that isn't easily explained. And I think what's the positive side about this, if there is one, is that whatever technology that is could be used for other means. It doesn't have to be used for destructive means. What are they? What capability do we actually have?
That could be turned around. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that's why when I'm looking at this prophecy, I'm seeing that there, even though it's describing some pretty scary aspects to the thing, I take it as ultimately extremely positive. And it also gives me an idea for how some people can rationalize, not the event itself it's hard to explain, but I can see why when you're going over it, being in a position where you know that you can't, not everyone is in a position to come forward in any direct way other than through artistic means. And in order to do that, you have to do it in a subversive way. Like you can't just come out and say something, because if you do, there goes everything for you and your family. And so we've seen what happens to people who do that, and there's a lot of them.
I thought you were going to tell us that your sister-in-law was, after acting in that movie, that she was asked to do crisis acting or something like that.
Oh, no. Well, actually, if you want to know the story with her, she went to a screening of a Jet Li movie at a certain point in her career, and they were going through afterwards. They're asking everyone what they thought. And everyone was like, green light, green light. They were deciding on whether or not to release this thing. It was the first showing for this group of execs and all of that. And they get to her and they're like, what did you think? And she was like, I hated it. I don't know why we keep producing this crap. And she thought she left this really bad impression. But the next day she gets a phone call from Jack Nicholson's secretary. And this woman says, hey, Jack was at the screening. He's really interested in you. He'd like to meet you. And she's like, oh, really? She's really surprised. And so she goes out to Jack's mansion right after that. And Butler lets her in or whatever. She's sitting in a living room. She sees a giant bowl of shredded $100 bills in the middle of the room that he uses for his fire. And she was in that room for a really long time before he finally came out. And when he did come out, he came out in a bathrobe and proceeded to do more coke off the table than she'd ever seen one man do. And then he fucking undid his bathrobe and straight up came at her this is what's happening. And she freaked out. And basically Jack Nicholson got high on coke and tried to rape my sister-in-law. She actually ran away from the house. She ran away, and she never got another gig in Hollywood.
Oh yeah, well, geez. I mean, would she even want one after all that? That's crazy.
Yeah,
shredded $100 bills for your fire.
Right, for real. Yeah, and so I got to listen to recordings on her answer machine at the time from Jack Nicholson, and they were creepy as hell. It's like, Shannon, it's Jack. I gotta see.
But I mean, that gives you a glimpse into what it's like there. And between that and all these crazy parties they're having with, all these Abramovich type parties. I mean, it's just all this stuff that's coming out. It's not that hard to believe.
Right. Well, there's certain things, and not everyone's on the same page, and that's the difficulty when you're talking about secret, not so secret societies, is that not everyone has the same intentions, not everyone's coming from the same places, not everyone's participating in all the same things, at least not to nearly the same degree, and so so this is this crazy thing. Kubrick releases Eyes Wide Shut. What could be called his final request is the release date of Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
So that was his chosen release date. A year to the day of the release of Eyes Wide Shut was the infiltration of Bohemian Grove, considering that the cremation of care starts at dusk and goes past midnight. And so a year to the day of the release of Eyes Wide Shut, Bohemian Grove. Eyes Wide Shut is the closest window into ritual elite parties.
Yeah.
In film. Bohemian Grove being infiltrated, we say it's infiltrated by Alex Jones, but not necessarily. He's physically the one in there, but it was John Ronson's thing. So John Ronson the man who was behind, when you watch both documentaries, both the one that Alex put out and the one that John Ronson put out later, of that process of how they got in there, you can see that John Ronson is the one. He's the one with the map. He's the one who tells them the times. He's the one who tells them everything. That guy produced Kubrick's boxes. He is the only man at that time that is known that was given complete access to all of Kubrick's archives. How is it that the guy who made it possible to infiltrate Bohemian Grove a year to the day of the release of Eyes Wide Shut is the only guy given access to all of Kubrick's boxes? That's crazy. So Kubrick had a warehouse of boxes, I don't know if you've seen that documentary. It's pretty good.
No, that is really crazy. And then doesn't that have something to do with Kubrick's passing away too, and somewhere related to that?
Yeah, he died right after the first showing of Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah. and so yeah, it's very, very peculiar to say the least. So, it's just, people are going with the program to the degree that's necessary for them to continue to produce what they're producing a lot of the time. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstood artists. I would say Lady Gaga is a very misunderstood artist. I don't think she has a lyric that doesn't have triple meanings, and they work best when the topical meaning is comes across as extremely superficial.
Yeah.
But I'm in my estimation, and I don't know this in any absolute terms, but it seems to me that every album that she produces is made specifically, for a pairing of film. And so I have those on my site. I stand by them as if nothing more, extremely questionable, correspondences. And they tend to go more direct as the film goes on. So the album makes a round. So it's almost like it comes across as like a gift for the faithful. So the people who have enough faith to continue watching the thing, they get a prize basically.
Huh. So how else would Gaga be misunderstood? Like misunderstood in what way? Like as far as the masses not knowing the depth of the meaning in that, or
in terms of people jump to kind of like if somebody is doing a satire that is extreme on something, they become the very thing that they're wanting to point out. So she's like Marilyn Manson helped her become who she is because her debut album, Manson was there. You can listen to the recordings they did that were supplemental material for the album with Marilyn Manson, and it's like he's the Antichrist. That's his thing, but his Antichrist thing is a play on Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons calls himself the Antichrist, so he's going to go ahead and call himself the Antichrist, just like Aleister Crowley would call himself the Beast in reference to Gavora, and so you have this, you have somebody, kind of like going to extreme measures, apparently, to make a ritual both half revealed and half concealed at the same time. So she makes herself the Scarlet Woman. That is her representation, but it's meant to be a mirror, as far as I can tell, a mirror and a reflection of what those archetypes are conveying and like what we're seeing before us. So instead of, pointing your finger and saying, oh, you're like, well, I'll do a theatrical representational model of what it is that is actually going on, at least in terms of archetypes. Because, you can only point at an archetype. You can never see an archetype. That was one of Jung's biggest frustrations with his students. Is he had these students for years and they couldn't get past that idea because they're, you're doing dream analysis and stuff, but the archetypes themselves are also subject to change. They're malleable. There's nothing fixed about them. You can't contain them. A symbol is something else. A symbol is obviously open to interpretation, and is malleable, but the archetype behind the thing is another matter. It's beyond that. It's beyond our ability to be like, okay, this is what this is and pin it down completely, because it doesn't work that way, because it's alive in his idea.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Fuck.
Crazy.
So I see what you mean about the Gaga and stuff. It's not just that she's, performing for the Illuminati or as an Illuminati symbolism, but there's part of it is she's waking people up to it as well. And she's also, it could be in satire.
Yeah, that's my feeling on it. I'm not going to say sit here and be like, no, No,
and that's not all the examples either. That's just,
Right.
Yeah.
That's my extrapolation.
Yeah.
And so, it's Metropolis. Film Metropolis from 1926 was a, Kabbalistic feat. It's like the symbolism in Metropolis is Zohar in a nutshell. Pardon the pun. So, it was, Radio Gaga was where the name came from, admittedly. So from her producer, right? Radio Gaga was a Queen song.
Yeah,
if you watch
like
the music video for Radio Gaga, it's all Metropolis symbolism. I mean, they're in Metropolis. They take Queen and put them there, and so that's the whole idea of the replicant. So you have the high priestess of the slaves being, the people's actual religion, and that how the religion gets hijacked is the point, and how it's the type of manipulation of the masses. And so this is what we've seen over and over again. There's all the evidence for it, 2,000 years ago. You have gospel Christianity is being pushed by the Roman royalty. The Flavian court are the first people pushing for gospel Christianity. Yet Christianity has every indication that this is actually, it's grafted onto the messianic tree, but it's emerging from the lower classes of Judea. Now, if the gospel were actually, of the people, why would it be written in Greek? And you can prove that it was originally written in Greek in all kinds of ways. And a lot of Christians are aware of that. It's funny because if you get into an argument with a scholarly Christian, they'll try and tell you that the New Testament isn't the original manuscript of the Greek, because if it's the Greek, then it's not the people's religion. It's another version, but that's I say there's every indication of that. It's been proven probabilistically that there's no way that was written by people who had no contact. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that's one of Joseph Atwill's things. Though I don't agree with all of Joseph Atwill's extrapolations that he presents often in a very authoritative way. I do think that the main points of probability that he points out are hard to argue with. They're there,
Can we speculate on your prophecy here? Like the tears of the soldiers, the prayers of the small children, and the young scholars. Like, what's the timeline if you were to speculate, or even just throw some, ideas out there? Like tears of the soldiers being like the next, lead up to whatever conflict we're almost in right now, and the prayers of the small children maybe to do with Pizzagate, or what are you?
Right. Well,
thoughts?
I don't know. I can speculate all over the place with that. All I can tell you is that as far as the prophecy is concerned, it gives the exact date of 9/11 and it gives the exact date of the TSA. Beyond that, it's like the commentary and of this whole thing, it goes into this whole like, oh man, it doesn't know and it doesn't claim to know. It's just playing around with the dates for days, and it's like like you can see, it's like this total exploration of like trying to figure out how to determine what follows, and even it's not as specific when it comes to that. It acknowledges a lag. It acknowledges this interval after this event that happens in the City of Power with the destruction of the towers.
I mean, even just on the surface, it's interesting enough. I mean, just those three sentences have meaning to me. I mean, into what's going on right now.
Yeah, totally. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen, man. I just want to get my kicks in before the whole shithouse goes up. No, not really.
Is there any more dates coming up, or like 9/11's it?
Well, the thing with 9/11 is that the point is, okay, so Tisha B'Av is the ninth day of Av. So it's the ninth day of the 11th month in the Hebrew calendar. And so it's communicating that the Qaphotic version, because it works as a mirror, is going to be literally a reflection of Tisha B'Av. And Tisha B'Av is cyclical. And not only that, but it's not just like, it's not one event. It's expressing that the fall of the empire will repeatedly communicate the same fundamental dynamics. And so that's why the two towers, it's communicating that we externalize the dynamics of consciousness in form, and are compelled to do it in this way. And so, we go through a cycle of Tisha B'Av. And so, like it's not saying that this is going to be, it doesn't give the date of Tisha B'Av as it's been in the Hebrew calendar. It gives what is apparently a random date. And this is what is so trippy about it, is because it's only 9/11 in our calendar, the day that it gives.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Even though 11/9 is what it is in their calendar in the past. And so this is why it's like it kind of gets irrefutable, because if you're following it through, I mean it really is when you're just looking at the dates. But it's like that's all. It has this whole thing about a star. It seems to be describing something going on with Sirius, that the whole world witnesses this phenomenon happening with this star. And I don't know, it could be allegory. I'm not entirely sure, although it doesn't seem to be pointing at allegory, because it's usually like when it's talking about allegory, it actually stresses that. So, like there's ancient Kabbalistic text that describes, God as an old man with a beard. But if you look at the introduction to that text, which I did, I transcribed it with my teacher relatively recently, it must have said 20, 30 times, emphasizing the point not to make the mistake of taking any of this literally. Like, we're about to go into this whole description of the strands of the beard and what they communicate and all this stuff, but it's like metaphor, 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 like, get that straight. And so it's just so funny that, like, what people do with, with that stuff, and so, like, but like with the star, it didn't seem to be doing that. And so what's weird is that, like, and I don't know, this is totally correlation that doesn't equal causation, but if you go to Google Sky right now, or to Microsoft Telescope, you'll see that you're not allowed to look at the planet Sirius. I mean, the star Sirius. There's two stars, right? You got Sirius A and Sirius B, and they're blotched out with this like yellow Photoshop thing. And like, I'd love to see somebody with a telescope right now that's strong enough to take a look at Sirius, because that's really weird. I don't know why they don't want you to see Sirius. It's like, I don't get it. But yeah, I mean, it's our twin star. So like, we move with Sirius, and this, apparently, like, I'm no astronomer, but from my little understanding, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but our Earth moves with the moon around our sun, apparently in the same way that our sun moves with Sirius around another center, right?
Oh, that's crazy. And so Darren's on Google Sky right now, and is that a big ugly blotch on Sirius?
Yeah. You see it?
Yeah. But now,
it shows Alpha Centauri.
So he's searching Alpha Centauri, and that shows it just as a bright star with a blue ring around it, like you're looking at a star. And then when you check out Sirius, it's got this. It's like It's like someone in Photoshop just painted a blob over it.
Right. So it's been that way, as far as I know, for at least a year and a half. It was like a year and a half ago or whatever. I went to look up Sirius again, and I've seen Sirius before this. I know that you used to be, yes.
Okay.
On Google Sky. So you used to be able to see it, and then at a certain point, they just did that. So
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. No, it's pretty crazy. And what was crazy is, like, I found that at right around the same period when I come across this thing in the prophecy about the star, that something happens with the star. And it's like, it's very, like, vague around the particulars around what its significance is. But it's saying that it's a star, that the whole world sees something happening. And also it's this thing where they're emphasizing that people are seeing things, but they're not able to come to terms with what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. And so it's like literally like, it's not, it's direct, but but their ability to put it into perspective is not there.
Or context, yeah.
Yeah, or context, yeah.
So are you speaking of context, this all sounds pretty new. Are you able to put this into film soon so people can watch it, or how are you?
So basically what happened was I have a friend, he's a basketball player, and he made a film called Back to the Future Predicts 9/11, and it was it went totally viral. We got 3 million views now. It's like 2 million of those views were in like a couple days.
Wow.
And so he basically was given, he was told he could play for all these different places. They gave him a list. They're like, he played in Russia for, I believe, 5 years. And they told him he could play at all these places professionally overseas. He used to play for the Chicago Bulls. So they were like, you can play here, or you can play in Santa Cruz, California, not professionally. And so he chose Santa Cruz, California, to produce, so we could hang out and nerd out on synchronicity.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's one of my synchronicity buddies. And so he ended up coming to my place. He sat in on study sessions with my rabbi where we're going over prophecy and all this stuff. And then he goes and he produces this film, this short film, obviously, a YouTube video of Back to the Future predicts 9/11. Now, he didn't know that it was going to blow up as it did. You know, we had a special on Comedy Central about it and all this stuff on After Midnight or whatever. And it was just like, wow, okay. And so, you know, he knew that I had a lot to contribute around what that was, because I relate, you know, that with the walk, because he's emphasizing the walk, that this guy is literally like embodying the Golden Bough ritual and, you know, challenging the kingdom, this whole thing. And the fact that it's oblivious makes it more profound. Anyways, whatever. I'm looking at this whole prophecy and he knows that I would love to produce something, but my computer just went down and I'm like having all this difficulty. I'm experiencing these challenges, and he buys me a fucking computer to produce the sequel. And so in the last over a year, I've been working on the sequel, and I had everything. I had my external hard drive crash because I'm just pushing it so far and all this stuff. And anyways, now I have a 7.5 hour film up called "Sorry, Cassandra, I Misunderstood. Everything Predicts 9/11."
I was checking that out before the show, and I was like, I can't believe this thing's 7 hours. I was trying to get a couple snippets out of it.
Right. So it's divided into two main sections. It has an intermission. I'm focused heavily on the band ABBA. And so I'm taking a trip to Sweden here to try and track down Benny Andersson. I'm not sure if it'll work out, but I'm trying to meet the songwriter of ABBA to show him my film.
That's awesome.
I'm like, when I go there, I'm going to try and navigate. He used to be friends with my uncle. So my uncle's famous in Sweden. You know, back in the 80s, they used to hang out, and my cousin has some connections, and I'll see how it goes. You know, I'm feeling like if I approach him, it could come across as kind of a stalker thing. But if I'm given like 2 minutes, he'll get where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm on this mission right now. Cause Abba is Hebrew for father. I don't know. So, the way that Abba was communicated with the mirror effect is Abba and Ima are the two upper, sphirot of the supernal. So you have Chochmah and Bina. That's Abba and Ima. And so there's no question like what Abba is, you know, referring to, and it's a pretty complicated thing here, but I'll drop something on you if you're into it.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about Pink Floyd after this too, but
oh sure, I'm religious about Pink Floyd, man. But yeah, so it's the same principle. Like it was Dark Side of the Moon, Wizard of Oz, you know. But so basically, there was this film that came out that was called The Visitor in 1980. And it's a very strange film. And my friend Alex Fulton was just tripping out on it, you know, and I went and I was watching it and I was like, what the hell is up with this movie? This is fucking weird. And so I do this kind of thing I normally do. I just look up release dates of films and see if anything significant happened on that day.
Okay.
And I look up the release date of this film and I see that the second biggest hotel fire in the U.S. happened the day and year that this film was released in the U.S. The film was originally called Stridulum, which means to shriek or scream, right? But as the MGM Grand Casino in Paradise, Nevada, burnt down day and year, and the thing was constructed as a giant Mayan pyramid, and there's no freaking fire escapes. And I'm just like, and then I'm looking up news footage on it, and they say that the alarm system was knocked out, and then they go along with what they're talking about. I'm like, what the hell is up with this event? And so I'm watching this news footage, and they say at the end, this was the second biggest hotel fire in the U.S. The first was in Atlanta, Georgia, with the Weinkauf Hotel. And so I realized that I'm like, wait a minute, this movie takes place in Atlanta, Georgia. And I realized not only that, but the whole film pivots around the location of the first biggest hotel fire. And so I'm like, wow, this seems like there's prior knowledge of the MGM Grand event. And I'm like, and this movie is also like produced by a production company that didn't produce anything else like this. Like the quality level is out of control. It's directed really well. I look at this guy's other films. This is his only film in English. Everything else is in Italian, and this is the only film where he has any big actors. He's got a ton of big actors. He's got fucking Shelley Winters from Lolita, you know, Stanley Kubrick's Lolita and stuff. I'm just like, what's going on? This girl in the film undoes a fire escape with her mind. There's like all this stuff, and then I find out that ABBA, the band, the last thing that they ever produced was called The Visitors, and it came out shortly after this film, The Visitor, which originally in the U.S., the original posters that came out literally said The Visitors, and they changed it to The Visitors. So I'm like, and then if you pair The Visitors with The Visitor, it's out of control, uncanny. And so, so the fire took place in Paradise, Nevada, like I was saying. The director went by an alias, Michael J. Paradise. It's not his fucking name. Like, and then it also took place on Archangel Michael's feast day. And so I'm just like, and this is the thing. Like, I know feast days of Catholicism, you know, and it's the syntax of it experientially. Cause I'm like, okay, Michael, and there's like an angel passing through my room is the big song on the Visitors, you know? And so I'm like, don't tell me it's Archangel Michael's feast day. Don't tell me it's the same thing I was saying, like with the 68 days with the TSA thing. I'm like, this can't, you know, and I go to look it up and I'm like, oh shit, it's the fucking day. And so like what is the probability of that for me to think that in the first place, to be like, oh my God, is this going to be what I think it is? Cause it's 360, you know, 5 days in a year. I'm like, okay. And so, yeah, but then I realized that I'm like, oh, okay, ABBA produced these other 6 songs, in the years that followed, that they added to the album, The Visitors. And so the 6 songs includes, Cassandra. And Cassandra in Greek legend, you know, had the ability to see into the future, but as a punishment from Apollo, for her not accepting his, advances sexually, he ends up making it a curse where no one will ever believe her predictions, and that no amount of her being able to see the future can stop it from happening. And so she sees the fall of Troy. And so this is what ABBA's singing about in these extra songs. And like, this is all like after the fact. Like, I'm looking at this in terms of prophecy, and then I find out that one of the songs that they added is about someone's ability to prophesize. And then I took the film Artificial Intelligence, which was, you know, Stanley Kubrick's last project that was executed by Steven Spielberg, right? That came out a few months before 9/11 and shows the 2 towers in New York with the water. I don't know if you've seen Artificial Intelligence, but there's this whole predictive thing with 9/11 in there.
The kid, right? The robot kid.
Right. And so, I took the 6 songs and I took the end of those songs and aligned it to the end of the film Artificial Intelligence, and I looped it backwards as it would, to show me where it would begin. And I realized that it's hard to explain. You have to see it in my film, Sorry, Cassandra, but the two actually meet in a way that the probability would have to be in the millions. I don't know how the fuck. And like, I never tried these things with anything else. Like, the song ends and the next song begins, and you can cut into the other film before the other, like, cause it's, I did it with a 4-square, mean. So I took the rounds that those 6 songs would make on their own, and I divided the film into 4 squares to demonstrate, so that you're looking at where it would land on its own all at once. And so I attached that into the Visitor, and it's all to the second. And so, like, you know,
attach it to the Visitor or to Artificial Intelligence. Okay.
So I attached Artificial Intelligence into the Visitor, right, before the Visitor is ended, okay, and took over the 6 songs where that other song ended. And so it flows like you'd have to see it, and it requires some, some thought, some critical thought to realize what you're actually looking at. Yeah. But what you're looking at defies probability. It's out of this world. And that's the thing, is that I'm like, it's all pointers, and I don't know, like I keep repeating, but this is the thing. I don't fucking know, but all signs point to prior knowledge of an event on the part of this director, who I speculate this thing could have even been produced by MGM and they didn't put their name on it. I don't fucking know. But like this whole revealing about this MGM Grand Fire, this whole communication around it, and then it seems as though the same thing happened with 9/11, and they attached the 2 rituals together and made them one thing. And so, yeah, I don't.
That is crazy. So how does Back to the Future again predict 9/11? Is there a couple different things in there?
Oh yeah, well if you'd have to watch my friend's video.
Oh, for sure, and I'll put that in the show notes too, for sure, for everybody. They can just click on it.
Yeah, it was funny. I actually ended up including it in my film, his film, because I showed it to a friend and I assumed that he had seen it, because I'm like, oh well, everyone's seen this, but it's like 3 million people these days, whatever. It doesn't mean everyone's seen it. And so I realized, oh, you don't realize even what I'm doing. I was like, this is a sequel. You know, this I made my thing as kind of a joke on that thing with, so back in 1968 when everyone went to go see 2001: A Space Odyssey, they presented it as the ultimate trip. That was how it was advertised. And so, you know, people were dropping acid to go see it in the theater. But the thing is, and I've experienced this, if you go and you do that and then you go see the movie and then you walk out of the theater, you still got to drive home, like, or whatever. You're out of the theater and now you're high.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, why don't I, like, not that people are going to see this in a theater, not like it's like that, but just as a joke, I'm like, what if I actually produce a film that you could schedule a trip to and it will last the whole trip? And so that was my justification for making it as long.
I see. Okay, that's pretty good.
So it's like a play on 2001, yeah.
And I like how you got it. That's a Space Odyssey. Yeah.
Internal space.
He's got I liked your thing on Facebook there with the guy taking a selfie of his ass.
Oh yeah, that was actually supposed to be a woman, I believe, but it could have been a guy, I guess.
I don't know why I thought that.
Oh yeah, that was a while ago. Oh, so we've been friends for a while. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, awesome.
So you're a big fan of Pink Floyd. How does this fit into your synchronicities and symbolism?
It started it all. So when I was in junior high, my brother actually dosed and I didn't, and we had The Wall showed up on VH1. And so he scheduled this whole thing. He's like, okay, man, we're going to watch The Wall tonight, with commercials.
Yeah.
And, and so, I had never seen Pink Floyd's The Wall, and I was a kid, and it just really impacted me because I was like, okay, what did they do? They made a movie and it's on mute and it's set to their album that they made, that they produced separately. And I'm just like, wow, that's a trip, what this is like. And I really, really enjoyed it. It just really impacted me. And then he tells me about, that there's this thing with Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon. I've never seen it, but whatever, it's a thing. And so I was like, what? And it just seemed really interesting and uncanny. And so, I went on my own. I was like, okay, third roar. Okay, start Dark Side of the Moon. And, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like, it's not just because I was looking at it on the whole. I'm like, when it comes back around the third time and you got home again, I like to be here when I can. Yeah. And it's like right when she's back in her bed. I was just like, give me a break. What are the chances of this? And then I look further and I find out about more and the Valley Obscured by Clouds, and I'm just like, they started by doing soundtracks. And then I was like, is this just what they do? And so I got curious and I just started exploring back then in I guess 6th grade. And, I found that if you play Pink Floyd Animals with Charlotte's Web, is just incredible. The Land Before Time and A Momentary Lapse of Reason, The Dark Crystal and Saucer Full of Secrets, which is interesting because the film came out after the album. And that it's just those three that I just mentioned, those are off the charts. I mean, it's unreal. Children of a Lesser God, actually, and The Division Bell is a thing.
I know watch the Land Before Time one because I watch Land Before Time fucking all the time.
Which is the album that goes with that?
My kids
the Division Bell as well, or
they just love Land Before Time.
A Momentary Lapse of Reason.
Momentary Lapse of Reason. Okay.
And so these are all available on Syncbook.com under Sync Media Research. And so that's my section there. I got they're all for instant streaming and for free download. And so on my Vimeo account is where I have the longer version of my Sorry Cassandra, I Misunderstood Everything Predicts 9/11. There's a version of it that's on the Syncbook Press, but I can't have as many gigabytes there as I can on Vimeo, actually. And that's Apophenia Productions on Vimeo is where that's at. But I put it there as mature content because I didn't want to give them any reason. I mean, I'm already, afraid with copyright stuff. I'm like, I put a year into this thing. I don't want anyone to have any excuse to take it down. Yeah, YouTube certainly won't accept. I mean, there's no question. It was down in 5 minutes, I tried to fight the copyright there, but there's just so many things I'm using. I mean, the thing is loaded with, it's layers and layers and layers and all this stuff of all these different films. And, some of them play for longer than 2 minutes. And if you do that, it's like sampling, like they just go after you. And so, so in search, I'm not getting as much traffic as I think I would otherwise, or what I know I would otherwise, because it's mature. Because if you don't have your Vimeo set to that you can have mature content and people don't even think to do that, then not everything's going to show up.
Right.
So whatever.
I think you can bypass that if you wanted to take the time to go into each of those clips that YouTube's picking up in the algorithm and offset like the pitch or the speed by, a fairly minute amount, then I don't think the algorithms will catch it.
I think that the amount that you actually have to change it is enough for me to feel like I'm compromising the experience.
Yeah.
When it's like, so what do you figure?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. I want it to be like
that
a
could
real
be the
film.
acid one.
Yeah.
No.
No.
No. I've thought of that myself. I've had a lot of people pointing that out, and I just can't bring myself to do it. It's just like, as an artist, like I don't want to pixelate it or make it weird. I don't want to change the sound enough that it's even noticeable at all. And in order to make it fly, it has to be somewhat noticeable. And that's just the way it is. But you know what? The point is that it's out there right now, and I feel really good about it. And that's why that's not why I'm talking to you guys, but that's part of it. I don't want my thing to stay completely in the dark. I feel like when you create something, ultimately, it doesn't even matter. Like, it's the fact that it's created.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think like what people, like I say, like what people take as primary is actually the primary reality. Like, I really don't. I think that it's the external, and they're like, oh, well, this is what makes this so. It's like, Alejandro Jodorowsky, who did the Holy Mountain and Santa Sangre and all of that. He produced a film that goes in sync incredibly with the fucking Fleetwood Mac album Tusk. So he produced a film called Tusk that came out right around the same time as Tusk. And it was intended to be a renounced film. So like, he never planned on releasing this movie as far as I can tell. It was just, and that's what it's about. Cause you got, the renunciate in the film, the Shivite, and, he's literally doing the same thing. And the elephant is symbolic of Ganesh, obviously, and, Ganesh is about luck, but not just luck. It's also just, that beyond your perception of, the initial layers of the thing, there's actually a deeper reality. And so for him to do this huge production, which it was, and then not release it for the public and yet still have it relatively available, just with not through any, official distribution. I just think like that's incredible. That shows that he was in fact a true artist, like who does that? Like, I never heard of anyone else doing that in that way, to that level, but so like, I take that to heart. I'm like, okay, well, I put my stuff out there. If somebody stumbles on it, cool. If I affect one person, cool. It doesn't, yeah.
Yeah. Did you put anything Pink Floyd in that movie at all?
Oh, in my,
in your 7.5 an hour guy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's all over the place. It's a hodgepodge of just, I went on a creative flow, and I was like, I'll just see. Yeah. This leads to this, leads to this, leads to this, and this is what I'm dealing with. And there's always more that I want to add. And I think I've reached a point where it's actually at the megabyte that I can't go past.
Yeah, exactly. I was obsessed with Pink Floyd as a kid. Like, this was back in the 80s. Like, I saw them in 1988 in Vancouver. And I was obsessed before that, like Dark Side of the Moon, obviously The Wall, Animals, all those albums, even some of the older ones that you're mentioning. Yeah. So you must be a bit younger than me then, right? You caught it, afterwards, right? Probably in the 90s or something, or 2000s?
Yeah, I'm 36.
36. So. Okay. Yeah. That's what I figured. So, Did you ever look at Echoes and the album Metal at all?
Yeah, Echoes goes in sync with Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and somebody discovered a long time ago.
Oh, really?
It's 26 minutes and 23 seconds long. They're the exact same length, or 23 minutes 26 seconds. Yes.
Okay, so it was Echoes and what? Sorry, the Jupiter.
So Echoes. Yeah, so if, in 2001: A Space Odyssey, when he's listening to the recording, it's a pre-recorded briefing made prior to your departure.
Okay.
When Haywood Floyd says its origin and purpose still a total mystery, referring to the monolith, right after he says mystery, you get the first beep of Echoes to go. And then if you do that, it ends on the very second that it says written and directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, it's the timing of it and the fact that there was discussion with him, with Pink Floyd around contributing to a Clockwork Orange. So with the Clockwork Orange, they were supposed to do Atom Heart Mother was going to be accompanying soundtrack, and Pink Floyd. So this is how the story goes, according to them, is that they didn't want to divide up their song. They wanted to just play it as a full thing. They didn't like the idea of taking the suits and separating them, But the point is that it's metal. To meddle with something that isn't yours, it seems to be a joke,
Yeah.
When a man's an empty kettle, he should be on his metal, but instead I'm torn apart.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh yeah, those are just amazing, amazing albums. That's good. I didn't know about the Clockwork Orange thing here. That's good to know. Yeah, it was kind of cool getting their concept albums, and one of the only ones doing that back then.
Right. I mean, it's Hypnosis was Gnosis. Those people who did all those Pink Floyd covers. They did those Led Zeppelin covers too. So you have like Houses of the Holy with the kids climbing up the mountain thing, and that's according to them, the artist behind that. It was supposed to be symbolic of childhood's end by Arthur C. Clarke.
Oh yeah, that's a great. It was a good series that just came out on that one, three part.
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I was tripping out on Ridley Scott announced at the same time that he was doing 3001 and that he's doing Jack Parsons' Sex and Rockets.
Oh wow!
At the same time, and that was actually how I ended my Syncbook chapter. Was with drawing that parallel between 2001: A Space Odyssey and Jack Parsons' ideas around the Aeon of Horus as a successor of Aleister Crowley, for Jack Parsons, Yeah. And so, but there was something else too. I forget his name, but the guy who did Pan's Labyrinth, Del Toro. I saw a recent interview with him. I think it was recent, but they asked him what his inspirations were, and he only stated one. Which was Jack Parsons' Sex and Rockets.
Wow.
And I have a whole synchronicity with Pan's Labyrinth and Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Oh, wow.
Really good. And I was tripping out on that because I was like, dude, I'm like relating the, and so, because Jack Parsons did Hymn to Pan during every launch. But he's the head of JPL. He's designed all the
JPL.
That's supposed to be right.
And he just never got the same amount of credit as Crowley in that way, in the occult way.
Oh, in the occult way, yeah, because he's under the radar.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in a weird position. He's not, hey, everybody, even though he kind of is. Yeah. But yeah, that's the point, though, is it's like, okay, so he's doing his Hymn to Pan with every launch. You watch Pan's Labyrinth, you wouldn't assume that there's this occult connection in that way, because it seems like this guy made his own, Greek tragedy with the Spanish and all of this, but it's something else going on there. And actually the key to it is another song that Pink Floyd produced that wasn't on any album other than that. Was it Zabriskie Point? I think God, I can't remember. Oh, shit. What's that song called? I can't remember what the song's called.
Several small species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave and grooving in the pick, no?
That's Umaguma. I'm saying that there's a few albums like Embryo where they weren't on any Pink Floyd album. They'd be on like compilations with other stuff. So like that was on Works, like Embryo. Yeah, Country Song is what it's called. Pink Floyd Country Song. And that's it, that you put that at the beginning, and then you follow it with Piper, and that's what does the trick. Because I saw that there was this gap at the beginning because I aligned it from the end. And so this is something I couldn't do when I was growing up. So when I was growing up, I'd often be using the LPs, and if it felt like it was off, I would fuck with the pitch, and like, and with VHS, and now I got like Pinnacle, I can just like jump around and see, what happens if I change this or do this, and I don't change much in terms of like the bars are the bars. I'll just, move the whole thing over, and see what happens there. Just to stress that, like with all of these, like, a number of them will blow people's minds because it seems as though it's like how you can recreate the experiment. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an experiment. I'm actually trying to apply the scientific method because I want people to be able to be like, how did that happen? Well, let's see what happens if I do it on my own and just watch the same thing happen, Yeah.
I got an email not too long ago from a guy who writes for Disinfo. Salvatore Ricci is his name, and I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he's from the Jack Parsons fan club, Antichrist Megastar, and he writes some pretty interesting blogs about Jack Parsons.
Oh, wow. Well, Marilyn Manson's Antichrist Superstar and Jesus Christ Superstar are a perfect match. And the key is to start the album the moment that the door of the 666 bus opens at the beginning. If you look at the license plate in Jesus Christ Superstar, that bus at the beginning that says 666 is a thing. So, yeah. But, that was an early one I found. And that's actually one of the ones when I was on Vimeo before I got my whole account shut down. I had 42 videos that, I essentially lost, because my computer fried right before that. I was just like, sometimes I'm just dealing with the worst possible scenarios, if I'm trying to do. And, but anyways, was Antichrist Superstar, Jesus Christ Superstar was totally going viral. And it was really exciting. And then it all just dropped away. And I was like, oh.
Darren, have you ever seen Jesus Christ Superstar?
No.
Oh,
No.
it's really good, actually. It's quite interesting, yeah.
When did it come out? Is it old?
Yeah, it's like the 70s probably,
Is it?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really,
Maybe I've seen
it's
it.
a musical, but it's crazy, yeah.
Like Grease?
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
kind
it
of
deals
like,
with a lot of other things too. It's incorporating race and all this stuff into the whole, the whole, holier than thou hippie movement. Like these people that are like, there's attitude in it, and all of these things. Like you can see it when you watch the film, like the subtleties. But with Marilyn Manson's Antichrist Superstar, it just really drives it home, and you can see what's going on. Like I think that's in the movie in the first place. He's just emphasizing it,
Yeah. I got to check some of these.
I want to do the Land Before Time one. When do I start that?
At the beginning?
Well, you start it just for when Universal fades out. But what I'm telling you guys is I got all these videos available for instant streaming on the website. And so that one's
right.
there.
You've already done all this.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Fuck,
Okay,
that's
perfect.
brilliant.
So I'm telling you guys.
I've been telling you for 2 hours.
I've put, the amount of hours that I've put into album film pairings. I mean, it's been my life.
Oh, I love
this
it.
is what I dedicated my life to. This and transcribing ancient text. It's like.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I've got all these show notes, and all I got to do is just put one link in there to your channel. That's great.
How do you do subscriptions or anything like that, or you do donations, or how do you?
So for the Syncbook Press, you can with membership there you get access to all of the radio archives and all kinds of extra stuff from Dropbox.
Yeah.
And but part of the stipulation with this is I was like, I really am I'm taking the position that I am not violating copyright because I'm doing legitimate research in a niche area, but it's research nonetheless. The films are muted for the most part. 99%.
Right.
And so basically I'm saying this is non-profit research, and I can't remove the non-profit. It has to be non-profit. And so all of the videos are for free. They're downloadable for free. They're streamable for free. And, that was a choice that wasn't really a choice, because if I'm doing this, I'm not going to mess around. And, I don't want there to be any excuse,
Yeah. So people can donate then, right? Is what you're saying?
Yeah, people can donate, and they can also get memberships with the syncbook.com, which I'll say is actually pretty freaking cool. There's a huge resource of archives of just awesome, conversations much like this one. So,
there's some great podcasts within your platform, right? You guys have they'll always record ones, and then there's synchronized episodes and 42 minutes, different little different styles, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and there's all kinds of other reading material, like Alan Green's Suicide Kings is in the Dropbox, so you can, it's an epic book that has yet to be published. And so there's, that's focusing on all the ultra mega high weirdness surrounding the Kennedy assassination, and the story of the Fisher King incorporated into real life scenarios. It's just, I would never do it justice. It's pretty over the top. You should see his, he has an introductory video that's based on it that he did with Andros Jones. It's actually really good. But there's a whole lot of members of our community that are producing films and producing all kinds of really cool stuff. It's a plethora of things,
Yeah, actually, I wanted to just read the it says here from syncbook.com. It says, we are a community exploring the impossible, artists and seekers looking at the interconnected nature of all things. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Exploring the synchronicity at the intersection of myths, magic, media, and mindscapes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it. And what else was I going to ask you about? Oh, the events. Are you going to any events? There's a couple of events on Syncbook. Are you partaking in that?
Oh, I have been, yeah. I mean, I don't know what we got coming up necessarily, but we did the Olympia Sync Summit a few times, and there's sometimes we'll go do a cabin thing, cabin in the woods. They did a thing in New York at one point. Yeah, no, it's And those are just amazing. I mean, the people getting together, and it's like what I related to is like, have you ever seen Witches of Eastwick when the three witches get together and the pavement cracks? You know, and they got the power of when of them being together, because these are like people working in high weirdness and, you know, really specialized areas, but from all these different places, you know. And when we get together, it's really powerful. You know, it's like
good. We're getting together with a bunch of people in a cabin in the woods in March. The same type of thing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So hopefully we got the power there, Darren.
That's right. Maybe we can the power of Grayskull.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, before we start wrapping up, I wouldn't mind going back into synchronicity for a bit.
Yeah, okay.
We kind of talked about the genesis of the term. Did we define it, or did we put you on the spot to define it yet?
Well, there's the term synchronicity and there's the term synchromysticism. I mean, synchronicity isn't a causal principle. So, it's basically, Carl Jung was just emphasizing something ultimately pretty simple, which is also the basis of just about every occult school. It's just they didn't call it that.
Right.
So they relate to correspondences, and you can extrapolate things about events or all sorts of things from this correspondences. You can get other meanings. And so you can extrapolate the inner explanation for something in a non-verbal way. So like synchronicity is a type of insight. And it's completely subjective. So it's not necessarily provable through the means that we normally use to prove something. Though, if you look at his Carl Jung's book, Synchronicity, a Causal Principle, you'll find that much of it is extremely scientific, and he's looking at probability. And so it's very probability focused, you know, and asking the question about like how much we influence the probability of the way that things play out, much like black swan theory, where, you know, everyone thought there were no black swans in a certain part of the world, you know, and then all of a sudden, after a certain amount of time, a black swan showed up, and then everyone had to readjust, you know. There's things like that. It's a flying pig. Like, you can't. Yeah. Well, you know what I'm saying? Like something that you can't deny that's right there, and you still, you know, it doesn't fit in with the framework of what was previously assumed. And so that's a big thing with synchronicity, you know. But synchromysticism is defined differently from J. Code says it's defined by certain others. Like, he sees it as, you know, meaning being found in what would be considered the mundane or the superficial, you know, where somebody would write something off, yet if you look deeper at it, you can see that there's more to it. But like, you know, synchromysticism is really just, it's acknowledging connections in media and culture and events, and that may or may not be coming from secret societies in any given case, or may not be coming from the dynamics of the vacuum of space and the cosmos, or, you know, or it could be, you know, whatever. It's just, that is after the fact. So like, that's not mandatory to the definition of, oh, we're looking at connections that are appearing because of this. We're just exploring connections and staying open.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm sure the way I speak at this point, because I've been doing this for so freaking long, and I'm so immersed in it that it's like, it's hard sometimes not to give the impression that I'm like, this is what this means, because I'm still open to being shown something other.
Yeah.
And that does happen. Sometimes I'll have to reevaluate huge thought tunnels or paradigms that I've created for myself. And I'm well aware that sometimes those need to break or adjust, you know. I feel like beliefs are okay, but they need to be malleable. You can't be so stuck to your position that you're not going to see something else when it shows up, which is a huge part of what I'm trying to do here, at least what my intentions are with what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, man. Well, that's good. It's great. I mean, we love these conversations, and it's good to chat about all your work as well. And I mean, as you start getting into this deconstruction of your Zohar as well, as if that's what it was that you were doing, we should have you back on, and we'll discuss more of that. It's pretty interesting.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to give a link to, it's weird to give a link to a Dropbox thing that's written in longhand. That's not very neat. I'll tell you what, if somebody wants to contact me and ask me for it, I'm not into secrecy. I'm into the mysteries. Like, I will happily share that with anybody who would like to look at it. At some point here, I'd love to get it published. At some point here, I'd at least like to have it all typed out. I have portions of it typed out, and I can give those to people. It's a lot of writing. And so it's like, I'm not there yet, and I'm focusing on what I'm focusing on, but it exists, and it's pretty mind-blowing. So, yeah.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, send me a link or something. I mean, that would be good.
Or something.
Yeah. Well, or a copy of it or whatever, or, as it goes along. I mean, it's great to get people to look at this too.
Absolutely.
You never know. Yeah, and good luck with that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I can't wait to try out some of your Pink Floyd videos. Super pumped.
Oh, sure.
Now. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, enjoy.
Right on.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to that too at some point this weekend.
Yeah.
Do you prefer, is it better if I eat some psychedelics?
You can't go wrong, really. I mean, for me, I'm kind of like psychedelically oriented in the first place, like I'm just like that. Like I was like that as a kid, not to say I haven't done that, my share of that in my existence, but I'm a high weirdness, kind of guy. And so, but yeah, no, hey, doesn't hurt, not mandatory.
Yeah, there's a 7.5 hour one waiting for you, Darren.
Perfect. That's about that would about give you just enough time.
You don't even have to drive home.
Just enough time to like eat my mushrooms, enjoy my mushrooms, and like curl up on the couch and wait to fall asleep. And I'd probably just fall asleep as the end credits roll through.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I'm like naked.
Right on. So. Well, thanks for coming on, David.
Oh, thank you guys. It's awesome.
It's been a blast. Learned a ton.
Cool.
Yeah,
well, thank you.
This was a blast, an absolute blast. Big thanks for coming on short notice too.
Yeah.
Oh, you got it. Yeah. No problem.
I think that actually the invite was like 6 months old.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do that all the time too. I'll find like every once in a while I'll pop into this weird little Facebook message area and there'll be all these messages there. That's
totally what happened. I just stumbled on it. I was like, really? How did I never see this? Okay, cool. Well, I guess I'll respond. So, it worked out well.
Yeah, it's good timing. Yeah. All right, buddy. Well, we'll keep in touch, and we'll send you a link when it comes out.
All right. Thank you.
Right on. Thanks a lot.
Ciao.
Hey.
And that was our chat with David Charles Plate. That was a good one.
Oh,
that was like one
amazing.
Of those fucking... Neither of us really had any idea. You know what happened is I think I just like Googled synchronicity.
No.
Or
Syncbook. No, somebody sent us Syncbook.
Someone sent Syncbook.
Yeah.
It wasn't Clint.
And then we were like, who do we get on?
It wasn't Clint. I asked Clint. He said it wasn't him.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was. Whoever that was, let us know.
Yeah, and it's great that people do that too, because we do try and follow up, and we do always watch stuff. And it's hard to keep up on it, but it's you can't just find everything, right?
We never would have found this guy if it wasn't for a listener.
And it's another fresh episode with cool, fresh research, and it's even though we've talked about a lot of this occult symbolism stuff, it's mind blowing stuff. I was blown away. I learned lots of that.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Crazy.
Great one. So big thanks to David for coming on the show short notice. Yeah, that was a good one. I think he's off to like the Europe right away too. The next day wasn't available because he's out of here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's perfect. So big thanks to him for that. Big thanks to you guys. Big thanks to our supporters, of whom we got a few more. We could always use a few more. You guys really do help us pay the bills and.
Yeah, thanks for subscribing.
Keep things on track. Pay off Graham's credit card debt that we racked up starting the show. Well, we're only going to pay off the show portion.
Yeah. And then,
not the clip-on nipple portion. It's too bad nobody probably listens to the outro.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
You just keep those things to yourself.
That's right. So, of course, check out grimerica.ca/support for all the different ways you can help us out there. It really does help. Notes too. Yeah, and check out the show notes. There's a link there. And help us keep having these chats. I think that's about it. There's all the other stuff you can do in the list that we probably talked about in the intro already. But seriously, do all that shit because it helps.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening, guys. And we will see you next week.
I want a good score for my synchronicity. If Graham reads it out, then Darren might give it to me. Hey, don't you please rate it low, yeah, yeah.